It's gone, disappeared without a trace. My bag, with my passport inside, is nowhere to be found. Frantically searching, I felt the disapproving gaze of my mother-in-law, Olivia, accompanied by a sardonic smile. "You brought this upon yourself," she sneered. "A foolish wife like you, struck by divine retribution. We're leaving for America soon. Consider this our farewell." Her laughter echoed mockingly through the room. In that moment, I realized my mistake in trusting Olivia with my belongings. Her betrayal plunged me into a sense of helplessness. I am Madison, 30 years old, married to Mark for 3 years. Though we haven't yet started a family, we've built a happy life in a town near Mark's parents' home. Even after marriage, I juggled the responsibilities of a career and household, striving to balance both with dedication. It had been 5 years since my father-in-law passed away. Olivia, living alone now, frequently visited our house to criticize my housekeeping, which had become a significant source of stress. "Why don't you quit your job as a working mother? Your work isn't that important anyway. You can't manage properly, and your housekeeping is mediocre. Mark deserves better support," she would often say, running a finger along our floors. "There's so much dust here, it's disgusting," she'd add with a dramatic sigh. I'll admit I'm not the best at housework, but being accused of neglecting dusting felt unjust. I cleaned diligently every morning before work and cooked with our health in mind. Yet Olivia seemed to say whatever she pleased. Belittling me seemed to be her way of relieving stress. Every day became a struggle. Then, out of the blue, Olivia proposed a family trip, inviting us and Mark's sister's family along. Emma, my sister-in-law, was as mild-mannered as Mark, and we often enjoyed each other's company at our homes. However, the thought of traveling with Olivia made me uneasy. I had often confided in Mark about Olivia's cutting remarks, so when I expressed my reservations about the trip, he offered an optimistic perspective. "Mom wants to join us. Maybe she's trying to create positive memories with you. It could be a chance to bridge the gap and build a more open relationship," Mark suggested with a hopeful smile. "You're right, it's our first trip together. Perhaps we'll make wonderful memories and break down barriers." I agreed, buoyed by Mark's encouragement. Olivia took charge of all the planning, from choosing the destination to mapping out the itinerary, leaving us to fit our schedules around hers. "I wonder where Mom has in mind. Hopefully, it's not too pricey," Mark remarked casually. She mentioned Australia in her email. I sighed, my apprehensions confirmed. Olivia had picked an extravagant international destination without considering our financial circumstances. "Well, we can't change it now. Mom picked it, so let's go along with her choice this time," Mark reasoned. Understanding his sentiment, I managed to finance the trip from our savings. Mark, Emma's husband, and I synchronized our vacations with the trip, and soon we were ready to depart. We safely arrived in Australia on the scheduled day. Time flew as we immersed ourselves in the breathtaking natural landscapes and savored delicious cuisine. Before we knew it, it was time to head back home. "It was such an amazing trip. I even got quite a tan," Olivia exclaimed cheerfully, still enthusiastic even at the airport. "Yes, it was truly fantastic and enjoyable," I replied, trying to match her excitement. However, I couldn't shake a lingering disappointment. "What's bothering you? You seem a bit down," Mark asked, noticing my expression. "Well, it's not a big deal, but I didn't get to connect with your mom as much as I had hoped. We hardly had a chance to talk privately during the trip," I confessed. Mark placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and reassured me, "Don't dwell on it too much. We all had a great time together, and that's what counts." His reassuring smile eased my concerns. Thinking I might be overthinking things, I followed the group. "It's quite crowded here. I need to use the restroom before we board," Olivia announced, turning to me. "Madison, could you hold my bags for me? Everyone, leave your bags with her, and let's go together." She handed me her heavy luggage and hurried off. "I actually need to use the restroom too," Emma apologized, noticing my situation. "I'll take over once I'm back. Just wait here for me." Shortly after they departed, Olivia returned alone. "That was quick," I remarked, surprised. "It was empty. Now, where did you put my bags?" She scanned the area. "Oh, they're right over there." I pointed to her luggage by her feet. "Why is my expensive bag on the floor? I gave it to you so it wouldn't be set down." "How could you be so careless?" She retrieved it and held it protectively, though it was cumbersome, especially since I was still holding everyone else's bags as well. Olivia interrupted sharply. "Enough. You're so thoughtless. Why don't you go to the restroom as well? I'll graciously keep an eye on your bags. Just leave them on the floor. Your inexpensive bag will be fine, she stated arrogantly. Thank you. I'll be quick, I replied, placing my bag on the ground and heading towards the restroom. To my dismay, there was a long line when I arrived. Emma emerged shortly after. What about the bags, Madison? She asked anxiously. I left them with Mark's mom so I could use the restroom, but it's really crowded in there. This might take a while, I explained, feeling uncertain despite Olivia's assurance that it was empty. After what felt like an eternity, I finally returned. Emma was waiting for me. I didn't want to risk getting lost, so I waited for you, she said, empathizing with my predicament as she often struggled with directions. When we returned to where we left Olivia, she stood alone, and the men were nowhere in sight. Thanks for keeping an eye on the bags, I said, scanning the area. Strangely, my bag was nowhere to be found. I'm certain I left it right here. I checked all the bags, but mine is the only one missing, I exclaimed anxiously. My bag's gone. You were here the whole time, right? I turned to Olivia, my voice trembling with panic. Your bag? I don't know. Maybe it was never here, Olivia responded coldly, sending a wave of despair through me. No, I know I left it here, right in front of you, I insisted, feeling a sense of betrayal. I didn't see anything. Don't blame me, Olivia retorted dismissively. I placed it there because you asked me to. What should I do? My passport was in that bag, I cried out in distress, my mind racing. Olivia sneered at me, her smile dripping with sarcasm. Maybe this is karma for how you treated my bag, tossing it on the floor. A lousy wife like you deserves to suffer the consequences and stay behind in America. I don't have time to deal with this. You're on your own. We're leaving without you, she declared callously. Goodbye, Olivia laughed mockingly, filling me with anger at her callous words. This wasn't just my problem. My bag held everyone's passports. Without it, none of us could return to America. Olivia's expression froze in disbelief. What? Why do you have everyone's passports? She grabbed my arm, her voice rising in alarm. Emma, who had been listening intently, stepped in to clarify. We were concerned about losing them with all the luggage, so Mark took charge of them. You might have forgotten because you were busy, Mom, Emma explained gently. Olivia reacted sharply. Is that so? I must have been distracted and forgot. But why were the passports with you and not Mark? That's odd, she accused, her tone accusatory. Mark had too much to carry, so I've been holding on to them since we left the hotel, I explained calmly. Olivia's temples pulsed visibly as she exclaimed, Why did you mention something so important? I had no idea your bag contained everyone's passports. I would have kept a closer watch if I had known. I struggled to believe her words. What do you mean? You took your eyes off my bag earlier. If you didn't know about the passports, was my bag stolen? Emma, looking pale and alarmed, confronted Olivia. Mom, please explain. Was Madison's bag really stolen? I have no idea if it was stolen. It was simply gone when I noticed, Olivia retorted coldly, stating with her arms crossed, unapologetic. I can't believe this. It's so irresponsible. Just then, Mark and the others returned, noticing our distressed expressions. What's wrong? Is everything okay? Mark asked, his concern evident. I quickly recounted the situation, and Mark sighed deeply, casting a disappointed glance at Olivia. This is serious. We need to search for the bag immediately. Mark and I shared a confirming glance. I left it right here, Olivia. You specifically asked me to place it here. I gestured towards the corner where all our luggage had been placed. It only took us about 15 minutes to return from the restroom. It must have been taken during that brief window. Olivia, where were you? I asked, noticing her arms crossed defensively. I was right here the whole time, keeping an eye on the bags, Olivia replied firmly. I wouldn't have wandered off, especially with everyone's important luggage. But your bag was on the edge, out of my direct line of sight. I'm only human. I can't be perfect, Olivia said, turning away. Let's file a theft report and check the surveillance cameras. The thief might still be nearby. We should act fast. Mark began to approach airport personnel, but Olivia grabbed his arm. Hold on a moment. Filing a theft report seems extreme. It would be more practical and faster to get the passports reissued, Mark said, shaking off her grip. We'll still need a police report for passport security, then we can proceed to reissue them at the embassy. Checking the surveillance footage could also help us recover the bag, Emma interjected, aligning with Mark's plan. That's right, Mark. We should move quickly, Olivia countered defensively. This is all her fault. She should take charge of finding the thief herself. Police involvement is unnecessary when she can handle it. She grew increasingly furious, launching into a tirade. Emma swiftly interjected, That's not fair. Madison didn't cause this. Mom, you should admit you didn't watch the bags properly. Don't blame her. Emma spoke up on my behalf, voicing what I had wanted to say to Olivia. Mark, showing his support, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Madison won't be searching alone, Mom. Why are you so against filing a theft report? Olivia appeared unsettled. It's not that. I've never dealt with the police before, so I'm hesitant. I'd rather handle it ourselves if possible. All right, I'll join in the search too. Let's split up and look around, Olivia asserted, attempting to redirect the conversation towards finding the thief. Just then, a young man approached Olivia. Ah, there you are. I've been looking for you, he exclaimed. I found this bag and thought you might be in trouble after leaving it behind. I'm glad I caught you. Your trip could have been ruined. He handed over my bag, bringing relief to the tense situation. Where did you find this bag? I asked him, taken aback. The lady left it on a table in the lounge over there. I tried calling out to her, but she didn't hear me and disappeared into the crowd. So I've been searching for her, he explained, leaving us stunned. She left it in the lounge. Without a second thought, the young man handed the bag to Olivia. Please be more careful. You're fortunate I found it. Someone else might have taken it. We expressed our gratitude profusely. Turning to Olivia, who stood frozen, we demanded, Mom, what's going on? How do you explain the bag being left in the lounge? Mark's voice trembled with anger. No need for explanations, Mom. You intentionally left Madison's bag in the lounge, didn't you? And you weren't keeping an eye on any of our luggage either. She wasn't lying about any of this. It's unbelievable that you would treat Madison this way, leaving her bag in a distant lounge. You were trying to avoid the security cameras because you knew they would reveal what happened, Emma said, looking at Olivia with clear disdain. I quickly checked the bag's contents, passports, wallets, and mobile phones, all safe. We were incredibly fortunate that such a kind person found it. Relieved yet seething with anger, I turned to confront Olivia. How could you do this, Olivia? Why would you behave like that? I demanded, my frustration palpable. Olivia responded, unrepentant. Well, she threw my precious bag on the floor, and I was upset. I'm not the villain here. Who would have guessed that this shabby bag held everyone's passports? It was a moment of frustration in the lounge. I didn't leave your luggage unattended, so don't misinterpret it. Olivia defended herself defensively. That's enough. Mark interjected loudly. What do you think of Madison? I've always known how hard you've been on her since we got married. I kept hoping you'd change, but I was wrong. I failed to understand her pain. I'm sorry, Madison, Mark apologized sincerely, his words bringing tears to my eyes. Mark turned resolutely to Olivia. Mom, deliberately mishandling someone else's property is akin to theft, whether you realize it or not. Reviewing the surveillance footage will reveal what happened, he stated firmly. Olivia was visibly stunned by Mark's words. Wait, Mark, you're not seriously considering involving the police, are you? We're family, and Madison is your wife, even if only through marriage. There's no crime in a mother taking her daughter's bag, Olivia pleaded, looking at Mark with desperation. Mark's face hardened as he responded bitterly. That reasoning is absurd, Mom. Your first step should be apologizing to Madison, not trying to avoid responsibility. Using our family bond as an excuse is embarrassing for a mother. We won't report this to the police, but we're severing ties with you. Don't show your face to Madison or me again. We'll be taking a different flight home, Mark declared firmly, taking my hand in a show of support. Please, Mark, hold on. This is too sudden. I can't accept this. Give me a chance to apologize and make amends. I'm begging you, Olivia pleaded desperately, her voice tinged with remorse. Olivia clung to Mark's feet, trying to stop him. But Mark, this is disgraceful. Please stop. Emma intervened, pulling Olivia away. With tears streaming down her face, Emma and her husband escorted Olivia away, leaving Mark and me alone. Are you sure about this, Mark? Cutting ties with your mom? I asked, concerned. It's necessary. You're the most important person in my life. I should have protected you better. He replied, embracing me warmly. We managed to book a different flight home. returning to our normal lives without Olivia. Emma also decided to distance herself from her mother. We moved far away from Mark's family home, completely severing ties with Olivia. It seemed Emma had also chosen to keep her distance. 6 months after our trip to Australia, I discovered I was pregnant. Olivia would never know or meet this child. In our peaceful new town, free from Olivia's influence, we look forward to our future. My only wish is for Mark, our baby, and me to live happily together.
I'm visiting my dad at the hospital today. He had a stroke a while back. And now he struggles with paralysis on his right side and has serious issues with swallowing. Although the paralysis has stabilized, there has been no significant improvement in his swallowing difficulties, causing repeated aspiration pneumonia. As a result, he now has a gastrostomy and resides in a nursing care facility. He sleeps most of the day, but sometimes wakes up and responds when spoken to. My dad, who used to be overweight, has lost a lot of weight and is in a fragile state. Today, my dad seems to be sleeping peacefully. I change his clothes and personal care items and look at his face. He loved cars, and when I was young, he often took me for drives. I also helped him take care of his car, and we have many memories together involving cars. I am Megan, 37 years old and currently working remotely. The reason is to make time to visit my dad. My mom passed away in an accident a few years ago, and I have a strong desire to be there for my dad in his final moments. My parents married late, and my mom had me at the age of 40. Perhaps because of that, they cherished me very much. I have a brother, Anthony, who is 38 years old. He works for a large company and is married. And he never visits our dad, citing his job and marriage as reasons. He occasionally calls, but it seems like he is just waiting for our dad to pass away. The conversations are always about inheritance, which makes me very angry. My dad is classified as requiring the highest level of care, so his medical expenses are almost non-existent. Still, we use his savings to buy necessities for his life. He left enough savings not to suffer financially, for which I am truly grateful. I am very thankful to the nurses and caregivers who look after him. Today is a nice day. I hold my sleeping dad's hand and talk to him. There is no response. Yet, this time is very precious to me. As usual, I talk about the memories I have with my dad as if talking to myself. After spending about an hour like this, I say, "I'll come again," and leave the room. Every day seems the same, but I feel the time to say goodbye is getting closer. Yet, I still believe that tomorrow will be another unchanging day. In the middle of the night, I receive a call from the nursing care facility saying that my dad is critically ill, and I rush to be by his side. It seems they also contacted Anthony, but he was not there when I arrived. "Dad, hold on," I desperately call out to him, but soon a beeping sound rings out. The doctor announces that my dad has passed away. I wanted him to live longer, and I cried in sadness. Tears kept flowing endlessly. I don't remember much after that. Feeling hollow, my aunt took care of various things for me. She seems to have contacted my brother, who is supposed to be the chief mourner. But he only responded, "I'll come if it's about the inheritance," and hung up. Instead, I took on the role of chief mourner. I only greeted the attendees, but I was told that I could barely stand after that. I hold my dad's portrait, forcing me to confront his death. After the funeral, I took paid leave from work to sort out my feelings. Every day, I talk to my mom's and dad's portraits. When my mom died out of the blue in an accident, I feel like my dad was going through what I'm feeling at this moment. After his stroke, he once murmured, "Honey, my parents had a very good relationship for many years, and I never saw them argue. They respected and cared for each other so much that it was embarrassing to watch." Although Anthony ridiculed our parents, I loved them very much. I wanted to have a marriage like theirs. But I couldn't have my wedding while they were alive. Instead, Anthony got married and had children, which I am grateful for. Suddenly, the month after my dad's death arrived, and after discussing with my aunt, we decided to hold a joint memorial service for my mom's 7th anniversary. It would make both of our parents happy, we agreed. Then, during the meal after the memorial service, Anthony and his wife suddenly showed up at the ceremony hall. I had sent them an invitation for the service. But showing up after it was over was just appalling. "I thought it's about time to talk about the inheritance," he said loudly, laughing. "There are still guests here, so let's talk about this later." I tried to reason with my brother. However, he wouldn't listen and continued. "No, I've already decided. I, being the eldest son, will take all of Dad's inheritance. It's only natural, right?" What he was saying was outrageous. "What are you talking about?" I raised my voice involuntarily. "I'll take the house, so you should leave." The attendees began to murmur, not wanting to expose more of our family's disgrace. I said, "Anyway, let's talk about this later," and drove Anthony and his wife out of the room. After seeing off the guests, I returned home and talked with Anthony and his wife in the room again. "You didn't even come to the wake or the funeral. Yet you have the nerve to say you'll take everything?" After I said my prayers by the portraits, I brought up the topic with my brother, Anthony. Of course, Anthony and his wife didn't join in the prayer. There's no way I'd attend such a boring thing. "I'm busy, you know. Unlike you lounging around at home, I have a lot to do at a major corporation. Couldn't your wife have at least helped out?" I couldn't help but glare at my sister-in-law. I thought it was useless to say anything to someone who doesn't understand common sense, but I was utterly appalled by her selfish attitude. "No way, don't make your sister-in-law mingle with strangers, that's like harassment." My sister-in-law laughed softly as she responded, "I think it's common sense, though. Birds of a feather flock together. I thought they were well matched in their senselessness. More importantly, it's about inheritance." With that said by Anthony, I brought out the bank book I had been entrusted with by our dad. Anthony snatched the bank book and checked the balance. "What's this? Is this all? Have you been dipping into it?" He seemed irritated that the balance was lower than expected. "That's not the case at all. I've only used what's necessary for hospital expenses." I laid the household account book on the table. It was a proper proof with receipts attached. Anthony clicked his tongue. "Well, then, it's about the personal effects. I'm taking anything that looks valuable." He looked around the room. "Don't be selfish. There are things among the personal effects that are important to me too. Sentiment? That can't compare to money." Ignoring my protests, Anthony started rummaging through the room. What an ugly sight. A portion of what you inherit is set by law. When I said this, Anthony paused for a moment, then said, "Then, I'll give you that old car for your share." "What?" I was surprised by his unexpected words. "That old car is good enough for you." "Is that true?" "Yes," he laughed. Anthony knew that I didn't want to part with our dad's car at any cost. After all, it held the most memories of me and our dad. As long as I had our dad's car, I wasn't particularly attached to anything else. So I signed the inheritance division agreement and decided to move out promptly. Satisfied with my signature, Anthony started searching the room again. My dad loved this so-called junk car. On days off, we often washed it together. I remember how beautiful the rainbows created by the water were, as I stretched to wash places I couldn't easily reach. My dad would drive my mom in the passenger seat and me, and Anthony in the back seat to the coast or scenic spots. I loved watching my dad drive, and when I told my mom, she happily said, "Me too." It seems that my dad proposed to her in this car. To say that our family's history is packed into this car would not be an exaggeration. Then I opened the glove compartment, which held another important item. Inside were a bank book and a deed of gift in my name. Father, having worked in a tax office until his stroke, had been gradually transferring his assets to me since our mom's death, foreseeing that Anthony was eyeing his inheritance. That's why he managed everything so that no gift tax would apply. And there were no tax issues. Although Anthony had landed a job at a major company, he squandered all his salary and had apparently been pestering our dad for money when it ran out. Despite looking down on me as the bottom tier, what a brother he was. Unlike him, I worked at a solid used car dealership. Not a major corporation, but as an office worker. This job was a vocation for me, influenced by my love for cars from my dad. What Anthony has left is just the money in his living expense account and that house. But since it's on a fixed lease, he'll have to either pay to keep it or take it apart when the lease runs out. I wonder what he will do. I kept silent, but a year later, he finally seemed to have noticed and contacted me. "Hey, isn't this house Dad's?" Anthony yelled over the phone. The house was indeed Dad's, but the land is more or less rented. So, you only need to pay the tax for the house part. It seems it's time for the contract renewal. I think Dad was very thoughtful about his future when he built the house. I didn't hear about that. Anthony panicked over the phone. But, Anthony, you never used to talk to Mom and Dad. You ridiculed them for being close and loving, calling it silly. It's all your fault. I remember when our parents were still healthy. Even when we were out as a family, Anthony would just play on his mobile phone in the car. I saw the sadness on our dad's face when Anthony barely responded to him. Despite all the love our parents gave us, it seemed it never reached Anthony. Why did he grow up this way, despite having the same parents? It makes me feel so disappointed. So what should I do now? The renewal period for the home contract is approaching, and he is very anxious. Well, you have to apply within 3 months to disclaim an inheritance. So it's too late now. So, you either have to pay the land renewal fee or pay the demolition costs to vacate. I only inherited the car, so the house has nothing to do with me. I took a very cold and calm attitude. Did you know and deceive me? Deceive you? That's outrageous. I said I only inherited the car because that's what Anthony wanted. I just followed it. Yes, I never insisted on anything about inheritance. Anthony made all the commands. That's right. The car. I've been researching it ever since. It seems like an amazing car. Anthony had thought our dad's car was just an old clunker with no value. But now that he understood its true value, he seemed eager to make some money from it. Ah, you finally noticed. Anthony, who always drives the latest cars, couldn't see its value. It's a classic car. It's a 1970 GTR two-door hardtop. It has very specific details like the emblem and the rear over fenders. It also has custom modifications made by our dad himself. A testament to the hard work he put in when he was young to buy it. I respected our dad, which is why I wanted that car so much. It's really good that Anthony, who likes new things, didn't understand the value of that car. No matter how much I explained, Anthony, who is not knowledgeable about cars, probably wouldn't understand. As if to clear up past grievances, I deliberately used technical terms to explain it in a way that Anthony wouldn't understand. Sell that car and turn it into money. Then give me that money. Enough. I interrupted Anthony's words. Don't involve me anymore. I plan to gradually maintain the car at my workplace. It's too old for ordinary repair shops to handle, so the repairs will be very costly. That's why I'll fix it myself. Can you do that, Anthony? With that, Anthony fell silent. But at least lend me some money. Why should I? Haven't you always bragged about your high income? From working at a big corporation? I mentioned that I knew Anthony had been begging our dad for money. Anthony had nothing to say. You live beyond your means because you like to spend freely. So now you don't have money for living expenses. I heard Anthony grunt. I know you've been gambling lately. If you know, then lend me some. There's no way someone would lend money. That won't come back to a person they have no relation with. I'm changing this phone number too, so don't call me anymore. Bye, I said and hung up the phone. I felt truly refreshed. Since then, Anthony, trying to rely on relatives but ignored by everyone since the month memorial service, had no choice but to resort to loan sharks. He eventually became sidelined at work because of repeated delays in debt payments and the collection calls that reached his workplace. Naturally, his income decreased significantly, and he continued to default, leading a downhill life as he rolled from one shady lender to another. Eventually, unable to withstand the rumors within the company, Anthony resigned and did a midnight flit to escape from the debt collectors. With Anthony no longer pestering me for funds, I found some calm in my life, both mentally and physically. Going forward, I'm eager to restore the car that our dad left behind. My father's hospital is outdated. I'll take over in the future. My brother is trying to take over our father's hospital despite lacking the skills. His reckless actions are a huge inconvenience to everyone. As I am neither a doctor nor a nurse, I couldn't stop his rampage. After our father passed away, the hospital was inherited by my brother. He doesn't know the severe punishment that is about to fall on him. I am Amy, a 27-year-old writer. I live alone in a single apartment in the city. Our family owns Hanson Maternity Hospital, which is quite reputable, and has been managed by my great-grandfather's generation. Almost all of our relatives are doctors or nurses. Both my parents are doctors who met when my grandfather was the director. My mother quit her job when my brother was born, and my father succeeded my grandfather as director and also serves as the vice president of the American Obstetrics and Gynecology Association. Despite being born into a family of medical professionals, I never pursued that path. I have always struggled with math and biology. At reunions, I'm still teased about fainting during a frog dissection. On the other hand, my strengths were in language arts. I won several awards for essays and book reports, which led me to want a career in writing. This aspiration remained unchanged even when I seriously considered my future. And I decided to pursue a career as a writer. I am truly grateful to my parents, especially my father, who supported me when I was struggling with going against their expectations. I don't want to see a baby delivered by you who became a doctor reluctantly. But I would like to read an article written by you who became a writer by choice. Do your best. Initially, my income was unstable, and I almost gave up several times. But I persevered thanks to my father's words. Now, I have steady work and publish articles on travel and gourmet food in web and print magazines. Just today, I finished an article about sweets that will be popular this spring. As the winter cold eases, people in the city slow their pace to enjoy the sweets, making my coverage enjoyable. While reminiscing about the taste of the sampled sable, I received a call from my mother. We talk weekly. Are you doing well? Are you eating properly? She always asks with concern, then casually mentioned. Actually, Nick has come back and started working at our hospital. Nick? My brother, Nick, is an obstetrician like our father, but had been working at a university hospital instead of Hanson Maternity Hospital to avoid special treatment as the director's son, a decision enforced by our father despite Nick's dissatisfaction. He has worked there for 4 years, so it must have been a good experience. Lately, your father has not been feeling well, and he seems to be considering his successor. Dad is already 73 years old. Maybe it's time for you two to relax? When I suggested that, my mother replied, maybe so. How about we go to Hawaii on your treat? She joked before hanging up. I wonder if everything is okay. I muttered to myself. Nick has always been selfish, especially in his relationship with our father. The thought of him living at home and working at our father's hospital. I hoped nothing would happen, but unfortunately, my fears were soon realized. Soon after hearing about it, Nick moved back home and quickly caused the issues I feared. Hanson Maternity Hospital has a large scale with 100 beds, and he proposed adding a new wing with 30 beds. Dad might not understand, but just being new makes it popular. Let's make the private rooms and meals as luxurious as a high-end hotel. Of course, our father opposed it. There's no need for more beds. Instead, focus on studying new medicines and medical devices, and put more effort into caring for patients and pregnant women. But Nick didn't listen to our father at all, and proceeded with the construction of the new wing. Our relatives were dumbfounded by his audacity, but I somewhat understood his intentions. He was probably planning for a generational change. Once he becomes the director, he plans to make the new wing the main facility, demolish the old one, and manage the hospital by catering only to high-end patients. Nick has always described our father's hospital as an old-fashioned, outdated hospital. Despite its history, it has undergone several renovations and repairs, and the administrative and cleaning staff always keep it immaculately clean. Feeling gloomy about Nick's takeover plans, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. In addition, there's another concern. Around the same time my brother started working at the hospital, Lucy started working there too as a medical administrator. She's my brother's wife, and now they live together at my parents' home. She hasn't caused any problems at work or home. However, my mother once confided in me. Actually, I think she's quite cunning. What do you mean? I asked, but my mother didn't go into details. We just have to get along. At my age, I'd rather not deal with mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues." She laughed it off, but her words left a seed of unease in me. How are my brother and his wife getting along with my parents? It concerned me. But I was so busy with work deadlines that I couldn't go to check on them. One day, while I was writing an article for a magazine, I received a call from my mother. I thought it was just our usual update, but she started the conversation visibly shaken. "Your father has collapsed." Immediately, I grabbed only my jacket, rushed out of my apartment, and headed to the hospital where my father was taken. Fortunately, by the time I arrived, his condition had stabilized, and he was sleeping with a tired expression. As I slumped to the floor, drained, my mother looked at me with a teary smile. "I'm sorry. He'll need to be hospitalized for a while, but for now, he's not in any danger." "That's a relief, really, I'm so glad." But then, my mother's voice grew somber. "However, the doctor said that if he collapses again, it could be dangerous." "That's terrible." I had heard that he hadn't been feeling well recently, but I never imagined it would come to this. As I lost my words, my mother smiled again. "Let's be strong. Your father is doing his best, so we need to support him." Yes, you're right. Just as my mother said, we needed to be strong. I repeated that to myself several times. But what about the hospital? "It'll be fine. Everyone at our hospital is excellent." Her words were true. During my father's absence, the doctors and staff united to protect the hospital. Not only that, but doctors who had connections with my father also came to help. When I went around thanking them, despite their busy schedules, they responded with smiles. "Considering what the director has done for us, this is the least we can do. I'm really grateful to your father. It's good to be able to give back." It was as if my father's network had created a large supportive circle around Hanson Maternity Hospital. However, there were people who couldn't fit into this circle: my brother and his wife. Nick and Lucy's lack of ability became evident. Amid the hectic days, they couldn't keep up with the pace of work of the other doctors and staff, becoming completely ineffective. If only they had stuck to what they could do. But of course, they wanted to be at the center of everything, which only led to unwanted interference and criticism from other doctors, midwives, and staff. Now, no one bothers with them. When I heard about it from relatives, I thought, just as I expected. Even as a layperson in medicine, the difference between my brother and my father is clear. It's not just a difference in experience, but in their aspirations. Nick has always felt inferior to our father, who is a respected obstetrician. It's more accurate to say he resented being compared to him. But I've never seen my brother make an effort to study or seek guidance to catch up with our father. Nick has a strong need for recognition but doesn't put in the effort, unlike our father, who dedicates himself to his patients and sets an example for everyone. Lucy also became overwhelmed with the influx of tasks, hysterically complaining, "I wasn't told it would be this busy." I felt sorry for the hospital staff, but their problems didn't stay confined to the workplace. The stress of not getting their way at work turned towards my mother at home. I tried to be as supportive as I could, finding time to return home and help my mother. She has lost some weight and tries to act cheerful, but it's somewhat painful to see. When we were cooking dinner together and talking about my father's condition during a visit, the front door opened, and my brother and his wife returned. They came back much earlier than other doctors and staff, but looked gaunt. My mother greeted them with a smile. Welcome home. You must be tired. Dinner isn't ready yet, is it? To that, my brother gave her a cold look. Of course not. There's no time to eat. Why would he say that? I thought, feeling annoyed. Next to him, Lucy irritably flipped her hair and glanced at the food on the table. Despite the chaos at the hospital every day, I'm envious that you, mother-in-law, have the leisure to cook. Just as I was about to tell her not to take it out on my mother, my brother Nick chimed in. It's true though. Even though she's a former obstetrician herself, it's amazing she can afford to take it easy like this. Furious, I confronted them. Nick. And you too, Lucy, enough is enough. Mom is taking care of Dad. And doing all the housework, isn't she? How is that taking it easy? Huh? He's in the hospital, so he doesn't need caretaking. If she has so much free time, I'd appreciate it if she could help make our lives at the hospital easier. And you call yourself a son? You just see Dad's hospital as nothing more than a tool to make money. Hey, you're neither a doctor nor a staff member, so don't act so high and mighty. That hit a nerve. Indeed, I am not part of the hospital staff. No matter how much I care about the hospital, I am ultimately an outsider. Yet, I couldn't calm down unless I said something, so I showed my teeth to them. However, my mother gently touched my shoulder. It's okay, Amy. Your brother and his wife are tired too. But I bit my lip, frustrated, and my mother whispered in my ear softly. Dad will be discharged from the hospital soon. I want to keep things as peaceful as possible. Faced with that, I had no choice but to back down. Nick looked down on me with a disdainful gaze. After some time, when my father was discharged, we all breathed a sigh of relief from the bottom of our hearts. The hospital's doctors and staff warmly welcomed my father back. However, it seemed that Nick was annoyed by my father's return. At home, he began to treat my father as an inconvenience, and even loudly claimed that my father no longer has the demeanor of a director. Lucy was harsh with my mother too. But whenever I confronted them, both my father and mother would always stop me. Let's try to have a good time while Amy is here. If that's what my parents wished for, as much as it frustrated me, I had to let go of my grievances against Nick and his wife. I forced myself to switch gears just so my parents could smile. My father seemed lively as ever at the hospital. He even seemed to enjoy reading the articles I wrote, even though he wasn't really interested in gourmet food. At night, the three of us, mother, father, and I would reminisce. The old pop songs my father used to sing when drunk, he now hummed quietly. In those moments, my father always had a gentle smile. And unbeknownst to us, he was quietly getting his affairs in order. As the seasons changed and the leaves on the street trees began to turn yellow, my father collapsed again. Remembering what was said last time, we braced ourselves. My father regained consciousness just once before he died, looked around at us all, smiled slightly, and then slowly exhaled his last breath. It was a quiet and peaceful end, fitting for my father. Thank you, Dad, I said, supporting my sobbing mother and expressing my deepest gratitude to my father. At my father's funeral, people from the hospital and those who knew him came one after another to offer their condolences. The grief of losing my father was still fresh, but it felt honorable to see so many gather and mourn him. Everyone felt the same, except for Nick and Lucy. They didn't greet the mourners or say thanks. Lucy even fidgeted during the funeral. They only greeted well-positioned hospital officials, trying to curry favor. But those approached by Nick and Lucy brushed off their greetings. Everyone was visibly tired of Nick's claims of "I will inherit the hospital." No one wanted such a person to run the hospital. For the first time, I regretted not pursuing a career in medicine. A few days later, a lawyer announced my father's will. Our main concern was the future of Hanson Maternity Hospital. Contrary to our concerns, the will simply stated, "The hospital is to be left entirely to my eldest son, Nick." At that moment, Nick and Lucy looked triumphantly at the relatives. They already had the gaze of someone overseeing subordinates. Whispers filled the room, not of celebration but of worry for the future. I let out a loud sigh, audible to Nick and Lucy, which they clearly did not appreciate. Nick snorted loudly and stood up, Lucy following him. "Remember this, I'm inheriting the hospital. From now on, we'll do things my way. I'm never coming back to this house." With those words, they slammed the door shut. In the ensuing silence, an uncle muttered, "That guy, he's got it all wrong." At his words, all the relatives burst into laughter. Our laughter must have been audible to Nick. But he wouldn't understand why for some time. Nick quickly proved he was not fit to be the director. His selfish and tyrannical behavior led to mass resignations. The vendors he had deals with severed their contracts. As a result, the hospital's service deteriorated and the number of patients plummeted. No one was willing to follow a leader who wielded power without capability. As for Nick and Lucy, they faced further troubles. Unknown to them, the hospital was in debt of over $1 million due to the new wing Nick had unilaterally decided to build. Nick was unaware of the debt. With my father's will stating the hospital to Nick, he also inherited this massive debt. Nick and Lucy lost their home and were left destitute, a fitting end to their actions. Neither my mother nor I, nor the relatives, intended to help them. Once, they tried to return to the family home, but we firmly drove them out, remembering their vow never to return. Despite Nick's actions, we couldn't let the hospital close. The hospital staff ousted the incompetent Nick, and one of my father's most devoted subordinates took over. Thanks to their diligent work and skilled management, the hospital gradually recovered. As for Nick, he lost his job, and his bad reputation spread quickly due to my father's national renown. He's still struggling to find re-employment. After my father's death, I moved in with my mother. With the insurance money and her savings, we're not struggling. But I want to be there for her. I continue to write as a freelance writer, living quietly with my mother. She grins as she watches me type. Mr. Thompson, who took over the hospital, seems to be interested in you, Amy. Why not go out for a meal with him sometime? I glance at my mother. It's an intriguing suggestion, but for now, I'll think about it. I turn back to my computer screen. I have to finish this article. It's my first attempt at an essay. The title is just one word, father, but maybe it's a bit austere? Ugh, I never wanted to go home for the holidays. My older sister exclaimed, slamming the table and standing up with such vigor. I had never seen Diane look so fierce and imposing, almost like a wrathful deity. It was so frightening, it felt like it could haunt my dreams. That New Year's remains an unforgettable turning point in my life. My name is Kathy. Just the other day, my daughter asked me, "Why do you bother saying hello to telemarketers, Mom? It's just a sales pitch. And they can't even see you anyway." I let her know that it's just good manners. to be grateful and considerate, no matter the circumstances. But she just said, and brushed it off, slightly breaking my heart. You'll understand when you start working. Today, I want to share a story that happened to me 5 years ago. I'd really like you to hear it. At that time, I was a hard-working career woman at a foreign company in New York. However, a phone call changed my life drastically. My mom, who raised my older sister, Diane, and me as a single mom, had broken her leg and was hospitalized. Living in New York, neither Diane nor I were at our family home anymore. Since Mom was hospitalized, one of us had to go back to the countryside. Diane, who ran a law firm, couldn't leave her responsibilities. I had important roles too, but I was more replaceable. So, I took it upon myself to take a leave of absence and return to the countryside. But right before I was set to leave, my company told me that if my leave became long-term, I would have to step down from my position and be reassigned to a different department upon return. Essentially, they indicated that they did not need someone who would be absent. As a single woman at the time, even before announcing my leave, I felt pressured as if they expected me to eventually leave due to marriage and childbirth. While society now better understands women's roles at work, back then, despite the company's outward rhetoric, the underlying belief was that women are likely to take leaves, so we don't want to keep them in leadership positions. Few understood, and I often felt envied by some male colleagues, because I held a higher position than they did. This demotion seemed easily imagined as someone complaining that you can't rely on someone who takes leave, and it's hard to back them up when they return. If only the duration of my leave had been clear. Depending on my mom's rehabilitation progress, she might need support even after her discharge. She couldn't drive, meaning someone needed to assist her with hospital visits and shopping. It was clear my leave would not be short. With no set end date, and no return to my previous position in sight, the situation was increasingly uncomfortable. That's when I decided to resign. I moved out of my apartment and committed to supporting my mom full-time. If it helps Mom recover, it's worth it. But when I first saw her at the hospital, I somewhat regretted coming back. Her first words were, "You hardly ever show your face, but now you come because of this." Admittedly, I hadn't been able to visit home often due to work, especially after promotions in my 30s that made visits rare. But to say such things to a daughter who had quit her job to return felt unfair. Mom was likely stressed from her injury and unfamiliar hospital life, so I let it slide at the time. However, her snide remarks continued with each visit. Once discharged, the minor jabs turned into outright verbal abuse. Struggling with mobility in a non-barrier-free home, she often lashed out. I was assisting her with everything, but once when I was momentarily in the bathroom, she hurled the remote at me for being slow. I wondered if it was something urgent, but it turned out she just wanted some tea. Honestly, I thought all this anger over just that. But right now, I am acting as my mom's hands and feet, helping around the house. The one who can't move freely and is suffering the most must be my mom. I thought this was a time to quietly endure and support her, so I resolved to be patient. However, my mom not only trampled over my consideration, but it felt like she stomped on it and then jumped on it repeatedly with great force. Mom would frequently get angry and throw things, aiming for my face with remotes and phones. It's a wonder my reflexes hadn't sharpened from dodging objects, almost as if I could evade arrows like the legendary warrior. Her reasons were often unreasonable: "You're late, your touch is too strong during care. You made a face for a moment." Honestly, I wasn't doing those things. My care was careful but firm enough to support her. To avoid complaints about being late, I began holding off on bathroom breaks. And I hurried through baths with astonishing speed. I wasn't too happy with how my face looked, and with everything going on. It wouldn't be weird if I appeared upset. But I tried to keep a smile on. Even when she said I looked like I was frowning, which I didn't think was true. Eventually, her verbal abuse extended beyond care-related issues. "You're useless, you'll never get rehired. How long do you plan to stay in our house? Why did you quit? If you were working, you could have renovated the house to make it easier for me to live in." Day by day, I faced her anger. The gratitude I had for the mom who raised me alone was dwindling to ashes. I hadn't wanted to quit. I had tried to take a leave, but it hadn't been approved. I had many things I still wanted to do, but I had convinced myself that if I could devote plenty of time for the mom who raised me alone, it was for the best. Come to think of it, Diane hasn't visited home much either. She didn't even come to visit this time. And yet, why do I, who quit my job to come back, have to endure being spoken to like this? My mom has always favored Diane, who became a lawyer. This is because, in the past, our relatives harshly criticized her for raising children alone, questioning whether she could really raise us to be decent people. My dad had an affair and left home while my mom was pregnant with me. The marriage between my dad and mom wasn't well received by those around them to begin with, and upon learning of the divorce, my grandma hysterically scolded my mom, saying, "I told you so." Furthermore, she forcefully arranged a marriage meeting for my mom with a much older man, arguing that my mom could remarry while she was still young, as it would be impossible for her to live alone. Of course, my mom furiously refused such a marriage, and my grandma tried to prevent her from staying single by involving other relatives. As a result, this incident led to a severance of ties between my grandma and my mom. My mom was really eager for Diane and me to be the perfect daughters. I was always getting scolded as a kid if things didn't turn out how she wanted. She never complimented me for getting good grades, but she would get upset if I didn't do well. Often as a child, I felt like taunting her, asking, "Did you always score so high when you were a kid?" I had such rebellious thoughts. But Diane was the exemplary student my mom wanted. Thus, Diane became a lawyer. As soon as she did, my mom, who had cut ties with my grandma and other relatives, started contacting them to brag about Diane. Needless to say, this made us somewhat unpopular among the relatives. I wasn't a foolish child either. I did well in school and landed a job at a respectable company, but to my mom, the lawyer title Diane held was significant. I was always compared to her and treated as the lesser child. However, it wasn't as if she threw things or hurled abuse like she did with me. Diane seemed to be treated more kindly, or so it appeared, and her behavior was also more gentle. The stress of the injury and the considerable support my mom received from the nurses at the hospital, who attended to her every need, seemed to have created an expectation in her mind that it was normal for everyone to comply with her demands. A friend mentioned that people can develop mental health issues after being discharged, similar to what was happening with Kathy's mom. I attempted to take her to a psychiatrist, but, as expected, she lashed out. I persisted and finally managed to take her, but the results showed no issues. It couldn't be true, could it? Surely there must be some diagnosis. But it turned out that my mom's transformation wasn't due to any illness. It appeared to be just plain selfishness. As I was running out of options, her verbal abuse worsened, and I faced my first New Year's since resigning. With her taunting, "See, I told you I wasn't sick. You're trying to make me out to be ill." This year, Diane said she'd come home because she was worried about our situation. And for the first time in a long time, the three of us gathered. But there was no festive atmosphere of a family enjoying finger food together. Instead, I served while Diane was treated like a guest. And the new year was anything but relaxed. "Kathy, serve some drinks to me and your sister." Maybe for Diane, but Mom, you shouldn't drink with your legs still unstable. What if you fall? Shut up. Have you finally started talking back to your mom? That's not what You call me a sick person and show me no kindness despite my disability. You don't contribute at all, just living off what we have. Excuse me, how could you say that? Quiet. 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 I don't need a failure like you in my house. I thought I finally had someone to boast about to the relatives. But then you became unemployed. Get out of here now. With those words, my mom threw the cracker that was on the dining table. At that moment, I finally understood the true meaning of her words. I thought she was just selfishly lashing out at me because I rarely came home. But that wasn't it. No matter how caring I was, my mom was cold to me because I had deviated from her ideal image of a daughter. She wanted us to remain elite, hard-working daughters living in New York. But what was I supposed to do in response? Abandon our injured mom together as sisters? Or should I have commuted by bullet train to support her? Cling to my current company despite knowing there's no place for me after returning? It's my life. Am I really obligated to meet such expectations? Something inside me had always been taut like a string. And it felt like it had just snapped. Enough. Understood. Then it's goodbye forever. The moment I glared at my mom and shouted that, it was then. Ugh, I never wanted to come home for the holidays. With that, Diane slammed the table and got up quickly. What? My mom was taken aback by the sudden outburst. Normally, Diane is the calmest and most composed person in our house. I had never seen her angry. I nearly questioned if it was actually her who said that. But Diane was biting her lip, trying to keep her anger in check. That look on her face, those were definitely words from Diane. If you had just kept quiet. What is this? It's understandable to have me bring the meals since Mom's legs are bad. But constantly telling me to do the laundry or go shopping. And then to remake the tea because it's lukewarm? Kathy barely has a moment to eat. I thought it was strange how much thinner Kathy looked compared to the last time I saw her. And on top of that, calling her a parasite and a failure. Do you not understand why Kathy quit the job she loved to come back here? Diane finished her rant in one breath, panting heavily. Oh, Diane, it's not like that. This child even took me to a psychiatrist. Doubting me, she's just a terrible daughter. It's normal to think there might be a mental issue if you're screamed at every day for such crazy reasons. If it's painful, at least try to limit your whims. You're pushing your ideals on Kathy too much. No, but, I don't think she needed to quit her job. Then could you have lived alone, Mom? Even now you barely move on your own? No. Because that leg of yours is practically healed, right? What? Both my mom and I were shocked by Diane's revelation. Earlier, you walked a few steps without your cane when it rolled away. I had to laugh when you hurriedly yelled at Kathy to get it for you. It's not like that. I didn't realize. My mom was desperately trying to explain herself, but honestly, I was too exhausted to do anything but think, really? I hadn't noticed at all. Oh, this is truly shocking. Give me back the months I've spent, Mother. Knowing now that her leg was healed. The mom who I thought needed my kindness suddenly seemed despicable. Why are you so cold to Mom? Diane was always the perfect daughter, my pride and joy. Because, Mom, ever since I became a lawyer, you've just been after my money. Kindness also fades away. What? Once again, I was taken aback by Diane's words. Mother looked pale, well, practically white by now. From the way you're acting. Kathy hasn't been hit with this. I've been hit up for money almost immediately after becoming a lawyer because it's hard to live alone and all that. Was that also why you hardly came home? That's part of it. I also just didn't like Mom anymore and found it bothersome. Diane answered nonchalantly, causing our mom to exclaim in shock. Hate. Diane, that's terrible. Huh? Which is worse? You only love my money. It's not like that. What's different? I know. You're begging for funds, and that injury? It's all due to your gambling problem. Huh? Diane, what do you mean? My head couldn't keep up with further revelations from Diane. The first call about Mom's accident came to me, right? Yes. They told me Mom had collapsed at a casino, tripped over some slot coin, and banged her knee hard. What? Let me make it clearer. The money she squeezed from me was used for gambling because she was short on living expenses. And the injury happened at a casino. She's a full-blown gambling addict. Wow. Our mom shrank under our disapproving gazes, hitting the mark. The last time I talked to Mom, I said I'm not giving you any more money. This time she must have been counting on Kathy. But that fell through when Kathy quit her job, right? That wasn't my intention. As Diane spoke, tears began to well up in our mom's eyes. So, basically, Mom wanted me to stay as the convenient daughter who works at a reputable company to not embarrass her in front of relatives, and as her personal wallet. But since I resigned, you don't need such a daughter anymore. As I glared at her, my mom awkwardly looked away. After milking Diane for money and she wasn't too fond of you, you turned to me? Don't you underestimate your daughters too much? Shut up. I raised you both just fine. So I should get to have a little fun with gambling as I get older. Just a little is fine. But gambling to the point of borrowing money from others is not okay. As we became respectable, Mom, you've just gone downhill. At my words, Diane burst out laughing. Really not a cute kid, huh? Has always been. Could it be that I take after my mom? But honestly, who can still be a nice daughter after facing this much ridicule? I'm not that delusional. That's true. Diane agreed with me, nodding emphatically. Rather, I should be thankful that such sensible daughters could come from such a mom. If I have to listen to you, that's it. I'm cutting ties with you. Huh? For real? Yay! I spontaneously cheered and went for a high five with Diane. What a welcome offer. No more living under Mom's wrath. And I can even look for a job. Oh, and if you have any troubles, don't involve me anymore. What? Mom started to panic at my words. Huh? What's that reaction? You're the one who said cutting ties. You don't say that and then expect help when in trouble. But we're family, we should support each other. That's why, if we're cutting ties, it means the family bond is severed, right? You just said cutting ties, Mom. And you mentioned support. But all the support has been coming from us. I get it. My bad. I take it back. I can't believe I'd be alone in this house. Ah, that's right. Diane. You'll stay, won't you? No, I won't. Diane decisively cut off our mom, who was almost clinging to her. They say money issues can end relationships. And I don't want to lend money to Mom anymore. Dealing with a gambling addict is just too troublesome. Trust the elite lawyer to have seen all sorts of situations. It's probably an occupational hazard by now. At my jest, Diane laughed heartily. Our sisterly reunion turned out to be quite dramatic. But it seems our closeness will continue as ever. Aren't you homeless if you leave here? You probably want to move out today. Yeah, well, I can't exactly get a house contract right away. Maybe I'll go to a hotel. You could come to my place. Huh, really? Diane. Would a sister refuse to live with her sibling? Well, maybe some would. Which is it? I wouldn't mind. It sounds fun. Let's enjoy our single lives together. As we continued our conversation with laughter, Mom approached us trembling. Please don't take my words seriously, could you reconsider? With tears in her eyes, she pleaded. I refuse. It was perhaps the only time Diane and I were ever so united in our resolve. Afterward, I quickly left the family home and stayed at Diane's place until I found a job. Diane said, You must have had a tough time at home. I'm sorry for leaving everything to you even though I was busy. And didn't even charge me rent. I felt a bit guilty, so I did the housework. Otherwise, I might truly become the parasite Mom mentioned. After living modestly with Diane for a while, I found a job and we each began living separately again. It's like getting back to normal life. Mom wrote to us over and over asking for support, but we both chose not to answer. We had enough reasons to give up on her. It was her own doing. In truth, Mom's legs are fine now. And she even took a part-time job claiming she was out of money. Though it seems she was fired soon after for poor attendance. She kept going gambling during breaks and didn't return on time, which led to her dismissal. She repeated this behavior at the next job too. With her age, it's hard to find re-employment. And she's living in poverty, unable to quit gambling. Maybe she thinks gambling won't betray her like her daughters did. But that's not my concern anymore. It's been 15 years since then. Mom has finally quit gambling. More because she ran out of funds than by choice, and ended up deep in debt. I was surrounded by some tough-looking guys saying I had a duty to repay her debts. But thanks to my lawyer sister, we managed to get through without issue. I wouldn't have known what to do on my own. Probably would have ended up paying just because they said so. Really saved me. We still don't talk to Mom, and I doubt that will ever change. I don't want it to. Diane has already considered legal actions. Planning for the worst, ready to cut ties formally if needed. By the way, Diane later married a fellow lawyer. They often argue about work directions, but she seems to enjoy it like a debate club. A marriage among the wealthy is like a whole new level, isn't it? I, on the other hand, ended up marrying someone from an advertising agency I met through work in IT. Completely unrelated to my previous job. Honestly, we don't earn much. Maybe I earned more in my previous job? But we have more holidays. And I can spend plenty of time with my husband and daughter. I help her with cooking lessons on holidays and, embarrassingly, go on dates with my husband. It's fulfilling. Happy despite not earning much? Of course. Money is necessary. But it doesn't alone bring happiness. Otherwise, a mom, who could spend freely even in debt, would surely be happy now. What's important isn't money, academic background, or career. I've learned from my relationship with my parents that none of that has any real value. What truly matters is whether there are relationships around you where hearts connect. Even if you have money, if you can't be your true self around those people, it's suffocating, right? It's the same thing. I may not be enjoying a lavish lifestyle in a high-end apartment, eating fancy foods every day, but I have a teenage daughter who loves to cook alongside me, a husband who still compliments my haircuts, and coworkers I trust completely. I can proudly say I'm the happiest person ever. Outsiders don't need to come to the funeral. On the night of the wake for the kind father-in-law who had passed away, my mother-in-law who had left all the responsibility of caring for him to my husband and me, said this. What? Since it's a family ceremony, please refrain if you're not family. And besides, Dad's $3 million inheritance is ours. Surprised by Judy's words, my husband asked again. Daniel, Judy, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral. And $3 million. Then, with a sigh of annoyance, the mother-in-law said, the youngest like you won't get a penny. Just renounce your inheritance. That's absurd. Now is not the time to talk about inheritance. Agitated, my husband protested, and I continued in a tearful voice. Right. Please, let us say a proper goodbye to Dad. The mother-in-law glared at me. Why are you, an outsider, acting like family? Come to think of it, Dad did ask the nurse to call you at the end. Did you have something going on with Dad? Daniel and Judy were dramatically disgusted. Ew, gross. Were you eyeing Dad for his inheritance? Scott, you married a terrible woman. I clenched my fists, enraged by their cruel treatment of my husband and kind father-in-law, and finally suspected of infidelity. Such despicable people. I took a deep breath and said calmly, I understand. We won't attend the funeral. My name is Christina. I'm 35 years old. Scott and I met through a coworker, dated, and eventually got married. I work as a bank teller, and my husband works for a multinational company. Despite our busy lives, we enjoy our time together. Scott, you're bringing your dad's clothes, right? Yes, that's right. Thank you, Christina. Since we both had the day off, Scott and I went to the hospital where the father-in-law was admitted. Scott, Christina. Thank you for coming today. He noticed us and smiled as he sat up slowly. Last year, he suffered a stroke and has since been paralyzed on his right side, struggling through rehabilitation in the hospital. It's getting quite cold, so make sure to stay warm. Thank you. And you too, don't catch a cold either. The father-in-law responded to my husband, who spoke kindly to him. While listening to their exchange, I changed his clothes. Christina, Scott. I'm sorry for all this trouble I've caused. Don't worry about it, Dad. It's what we should do. Exactly, just let us know if there's anything else we can do. As we were enjoying a peaceful moment, the door to the room burst open. It was the mother-in-law, brother-in-law Daniel, and sister-in-law Judy. The mother-in-law, who stormed noisily into the hospital room, said insincerely upon noticing us, "Oh. And who might this be?" "Scott, and, what was your name again?" Seizing the opportunity, Daniel and Judy eagerly continued. "Mom, that's too harsh. Even if she's just a burden of a wife." "Right. It's Kristen, right?" Judy snickered condescendingly. I couldn't respond, just remained silent. Even after 5 years of marriage, they had never once spoken kindly to us. "Hey. Mom, Daniel, Judy. I can take it, but don't be rude to Christina." Defending me as I looked down, my husband spoke irritably. The mother-in-law sighed and shrugged her shoulders, saying, "Oh, come on. Why are you so angry? It's just a joke, laugh it off. There's a limit to jokes." "I've always thought," Scott began, but the mother-in-law cut him off. "That doesn't matter. We're going to have a family discussion now. So you outsiders should leave." "What? Family? I am family too," Scott protested, but Daniel dismissively waved him off. "You're too presumptuous for the youngest who can't do anything. Just leave." Judy laughed derisively and said, "Right. You're just in the way." Despite feeling crushed, my gentle husband took my hand. "Let's go home," he said with a pained voice, and I squeezed his hand in return. We said bye to the father-in-law, who looked troubled, and left the room. On the way home, Scott held my hand tightly and said with a choked voice, "Christina, I'm really sorry. My family keeps saying such disrespectful things." I smiled at my husband as he apologized. "Don't worry about it. The one who's really hurt is you." Upon hearing my words, my husband's face crumpled as if he was about to cry. He was born the youngest of 3 siblings. While his mother doted on his older brother Daniel and sister Judy, she was indifferent to him. As a child, she never once attended any school events like class observations or sports days that he participated in. She would buy anything his siblings asked for, but always ignored his requests. The clothes and toys he received were hand-me-downs from his older siblings, always worn out. From a young age, he had resigned himself to the futility of asking for anything. Furthermore, even the tuition for high school was reluctantly provided. He was constantly told, "You'll work after middle school." Despite the poor academic performance of his siblings, who were sent to private universities, his mother refused to pay any of his tuition fees. However, because he was a good student, he attempted to take out student loans. But upon learning this, his father helped out and paid for him to attend a relatively affordable state university. Thanks to this, he was able to work at the company where he is employed today. Even when we went to greet his family upon our decision to marry, his mother showed no interest in us. She never asked my name and spoke with apparent disinterest. "Do as you please." With those dismissive words, she didn't even bother to offer us coffee, clearly wanting us to leave quickly. Instead, Daniel and Judy sneered down at me. To think someone would marry such a man. Really, though. She must be quite the odd one. My husband has always been treated as a nuisance and a burden by his family. Even after our marriage, nothing changed. And we were never invited to family weddings or memorial services. Relatives who didn't know any better would often ask us why we hadn't attended, blaming us. No matter how cold they were to me, Dad was always on my side. My husband murmured softly. His father, often away due to work when he was young, wasn't home much. Nevertheless, he always made sure to provide presents for events like Christmas and birthdays. His mother never did anything like that. But my husband was content. Despite his busy schedule, he would take time off work to attend his graduation, something he still happily talks about today. It was only the father-in-law who smiled and congratulated us on our marriage. He always cared about me too, always greeting me with a smile. However, even he was coldly referred to as nothing more than an ATM by his family after he fell ill, and they treated him harshly. That's why we willingly took on the task of caring for him. Scott. I will always cherish you and your father. Hearing this, my husband smiled bashfully. Gently picking up my hand, he said, "Thank you always. I'm sorry for the trouble." A few months later, we received a call from the hospital. "Your father-in-law has had another stroke." We rushed there. But by the time we arrived, the father-in-law had already passed away. Dad. I wanted to do more for you. Dad. Dad. My husband cried out loudly as he looked at his father, now peacefully at rest. The words the father-in-law had spoken to me. And his smiling face flashed through my mind. And before I knew it, I was crying with big tears. When the mother-in-law, Daniel, and Judy arrived, they showed no tears and seemed rather in good spirits. "We've arranged the funeral. You handle the troublesome parts," she said dismissively, pushing a funeral service brochure onto my husband. And then leaving promptly. We were stunned, but then realized, we have to properly send off your dad. We immediately contacted the funeral home to arrange the wake and funeral. A few days later, after the wake went smoothly and the mourners had left, I spoke to the mother-in-law, now in mourning clothes. "I want to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's funeral." "Oh, just ask the funeral director, everything's taken care of." Then she said something unbelievable. "You outsiders don't need to come to tomorrow's funeral." Excuse me? What? My husband and I asked at the same time. Seeing our reaction, Daniel smirked and opened his mouth. "Thanks for your hard work with the caregiving. But now you're dismissed. Don't show up at the funeral tomorrow." "What are you talking about? Explain yourself." As I spoke with a trembling voice, shaken by the situation, Judy quickly interjected. "It's obvious. Did you really think you could attend? The funeral is a family ceremony. It's none of your business, you outsiders. Stay away." And the $3 million inheritance, we're taking it. Frustrated, my husband asked back. "Daniel, Judy, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral. This is no time for jokes. And $3 million. The mother-in-law lazily shook her head. "Dad was a high earner, and we come from a wealthy family. So there's a lot of inheritance. Just so you know, you should renounce your inheritance. There's nothing for the youngest." "What are you saying? Who cares about inheritance right now?" Continuing after my husband, I said, trying to hold back tears. "Scott is right. Please let us say goodbye to him." But the mother-in-law glared at me sharply. What are you doing acting like family? Ah, that's right, at the end. Dad asked the nurse to call you, didn't he? That's because we were always the ones taking care of him. As I answered, Daniel and Judy exaggeratedly grimaced. You were having an affair with Dad, weren't you? Disgusting. The worst. You were probably eyeing inheritance, weren't you? You were just caregiving for the money, right? Scott, you've been deceived. What are you talking about? Christina is. As my husband raised his voice in anger, the mother-in-law quickly interjected. I don't even want to call such a despicable daughter-in-law who cheats with her husband's father, and this nuisance of a youngest son, family. Leave now and never appear before us again. Enough. Christina has been earnestly caring for Dad. How can you say such things? I bit my lip hard. To be treated so poorly by these people. Suspected of infidelity with the kind father-in-law. I was beyond angry. Taking a deep breath, I said in a low voice. Scott, that's enough. Glaring at the mother-in-law and others, I continued. I understand what you all are saying. We won't attend the funeral. Hearing this, my husband replied in a calm voice. Yeah. I don't want to consider people who mock us like this family. We'll pay respects to Dad at his grave. With that, we left the place after paying respects to the father-in-law. 2 days later, the mother-in-law called my cell phone. I told my husband. And it seemed she had called him as well. Don't answer. Let's just ignore it. As I was hesitating about whether to answer the phone, Scott said that, so I didn't pick up at all. However, the calls from the mother-in-law were persistent and daily. A week later, when I was thinking about blocking her due to the incessant calls, the mother-in-law, along with Daniel and Judy, suddenly visited our apartment. What do you want now? Scott asked, arms crossed, as the restless mother-in-law started accusing us rapidly. What do you mean by this? The inheritance from Dad, all of it yours? I wasn't told about this. Hearing this, Scott responded firmly. Oh, that's what this is about. A lawyer came to us too, and we heard everything. It was the day after the funeral. A lawyer visited us and informed us that the father-in-law had left a will. The will stated that all his inheritance should be transferred to us. And we had already started the process to receive it. You thought you'd naturally get the inheritance because you're family, right? Normally, you'd definitely receive a mandatory portion, wouldn't you? That's right. And yet, all the inheritance is going to Scott and his. We're told we don't qualify for any of it. As the mother-in-law was panicking, her face turning bright red, and becoming agitated, Scott and I calmly stated, Of course. My father-in-law had requested the lawyer to disinherit you, ensuring you wouldn't get the inheritance. If you're disinherited, you can't even receive the minimum reserved portion. Then Daniel leaned forward, raising his voice. Yeah, that's it. What does disinheritance mean? I can't accept this. Daniel. I heard you were always saying horrible things like calling Dad useless and telling him to get a job when he needed care. Scott glared at attacking Daniel and spoke in a low voice. That's not. Moreover, it seems you've been misusing Dad's bank deposits. That's reason enough for disinheritance. Why do you guys know that? Your father left a letter with the lawyer for us. It was all written there. As Daniel panicked, I calmly stated. Then Judy interjected. But still, it's not fair for you two to take everything. I need money too. However, Scott shook his head in dismay at such a sister. Judy, you've been heavily misusing money and have a habit of debt, right? On the day we were driven out of the hospital room. You even made Dad pay off your debts. That's right. Forcing someone to take over your debts is also a reason for disinheritance. As Scott and I pressed on, Judy was at a loss for words. Silence fell over Daniel and Judy. Seeing this, the impatient mother-in-law shouted, "What? The nuisance youngest. Don't get cocky." Amidst the resounding insults, Scott said calmly, "Just to say, the worst one is Mom. She's been cheating for years. While Dad was on solo assignments, doing whatever she wanted." "What? That's not." Daniel and Judy, with eyes wide open, stared at the mother-in-law. I sighed and said, "Did you two not know? You underestimated kind Dad, didn't you? Dad gathered evidence beforehand and prepared everything so it would reach us and the lawyer." Scott frowned and scornfully continued looking at the mother-in-law. "If a spouse has been cheating for many years, you can disinherit them. Didn't you know that? Accusing me and Dad of an affair during the wake was because you were cheating yourself, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have thought of such an idea." Under our relentless words, the mother-in-law's face twisted rapidly. Then, turning pale, she could only tremble her lips. "You really thought you could do whatever you wanted and still get the inheritance? Thinking you could regret it now is too late." With anger seeping through, Scott spat those words out. And Daniel miserably clung to him. "Hey, Scott. Please, I'm begging you, just give me a little bit of the inheritance. I need money because I failed at investing. There must be a lot left, right?" Following Daniel, Judy collapsed to the floor as if she were about to prostrate herself. Her face, messed up from tears, she rubbed against Scott's feet, clinging to him. "I'm sorry for everything that's happened. Please forgive me. If it turns out that I have debts, I'll be divorced." Scott looked down disdainfully at Daniel and Judy, displaying their disgraceful behavior. "I will never forget how you treated me and Dad. Don't expect forgiveness." As he trembled with clenched fists, watching this scene, the mother-in-law furrowed her brows and raised her voice. "Do you really think it's okay to abandon your family like this? You know what will happen." Hearing the pitiful cries of the mother-in-law, I inadvertently let out a "what?" Scott and I looked at each other and spoke together. "Family? Please don't make me laugh. Weren't you the ones who first called us outsiders? There's no way we would help outsiders like you. You're just facing the consequences of your actions." With Scott's final words, we locked out the three of them. It was a hassle to push out the three who were desperately clinging. But with the help of the building manager who heard the commotion, we managed to send them away. The expressions on the mother-in-law's face as they left were completely worn out, showing none of the spiteful features they had before. After the three left, our apartment returned to silence, and Scott slowly pulled me close as I let out a deep sigh. Soon after, we received the inheritance from the father-in-law. To avoid any further trouble from them, we moved immediately, and even put a lock on our family register. Finally, peaceful days arrived. From what relatives told me, Daniel had resorted to borrowing money from consumer finance and loan sharks to cover his failed investments. Now overwhelmed with debt, he is trembling with dread from collection calls, working at a factory and living a meager life. Judy, discovered by her husband to have a debt problem, was divorced. She returned to her parents' home without a decent job, living a life far from her previous glamorous one. She was turned away from night jobs and is barely managing her increasing debts with a part-time job. The mother-in-law's affair partner turned out to be a married man. Naturally, his wife found out and demanded a large amount of compensation. The mother-in-law, now greatly aged, could not find a new lover and lives in a shabby apartment, struggling even for daily meals. But that is no longer our concern. Meanwhile, freed from worries, Scott was promoted to department head at work. We also had a beautiful daughter, and I am spending my days as a stay-at-home mom. Remembering the kindness of the father-in-law, I pour a lot of love into our daughter. We plan to continue living these warm days with Scott and our daughter. The mother-in-law, Daniel, and Judy were selfish and despicable people. It's a miracle how Scott turned out to be such a decent person. I'm truly glad that the father-in-law was on our side. Despite their horrendous actions, like calling him useless or demanding he work while sick, making him pay debts, or cheating for years, they still thought they were entitled to the inheritance. It's just too shameless. It's good that the inheritance didn't end up in the hands of those devils, thanks to the father-in-law, who properly arranged the disinheritance. My sister got accepted into one of the top universities in the country. So we're moving to Boston. When my parents told me, I naturally assumed I'd be moving too. However, my dad laughed and said, "What are you talking about? There's no way we're taking you." "What?" "But I'm starting high school next fall." Then, without looking at me, my mom said, "We don't have the money to send you to high school. It's all going to your sister. So what am I supposed to do? We've decided to put you in an institution." Huh? I was stunned. They were moving with my sister for her education and putting me in an institution. Are they serious? The next day, a kind-looking staff member from the institution came to pick me up. Having lost all will to resist, I was about to get into the institution's car. Just then, my mom told me, "Not having to put up with a failure like you is a huge weight off my shoulders. Goodbye, we won't see each other again." And so, I was sent to an institution by my parents, 10 years later. My parents would appear before me again. My name is Abby Owen. I am a 25-year-old working adult. I am still learning on the job, but I lead a busy and fulfilling life. Although I am happy now, I have a painful past. Let's start from there. I was born the second daughter of an ordinary middle-class family, the Owen family. My family consists of my dad, Robert, who works for a construction company, my mom, Sandra, who works part-time at a handicraft shop, and my older sister, Lucy, who is 3 years my senior. From a young sister's perspective, my sister was incredibly smart. Both of my parents graduated from a local public high school and didn't go to college. They were average students at school. Amidst this, my sister seemed to be smart beyond anyone's guess. Her excellence was apparent from childhood, mastering the alphabet at 2, simple words at 3. She went to a local public elementary school, but the classes were too easy, and she started solving high school level problems on her own, which troubled her teachers. Being too smart brought its own challenges. My sister, who stood out among her peers, started saying she didn't want to go to school during the latter half of elementary school, and spent her days reading books in the nurse's office. Lucy is just so smart. She might be what you call gifted. Maybe you should consider letting her take the entrance exams. for private junior high schools to provide her with an education that suits her. Suggested an elementary school teacher. My parents decided to let my sister take the entrance exams, and she easily passed into one of the top private junior highs in the country. I can't forget how happy my parents were at that time. It's like a kite producing a hawk. I can't believe Lucy is this bright. Really? Maybe she'll be a doctor or a lawyer in the future? We're set for life. Growing up beside such a sister, what kind of child was I? I had average grades. Not bad, but not outstanding like my sister. Nor did I have any particular talents in sports or arts, just a very ordinary girl. The way people looked at me was cold, especially my parents. Lucy is excellent, but Abby can't do anything. Why not learn a thing or two from your sister? You weren't exactly born with the sharpest mind. That was almost like a catchphrase for my parents. My grandparents and other relatives were the same, always praising my sister. And hardly noticing me. Yet, I wanted my parents to notice me and, knowing I couldn't compete with my sister, I tried my best. Then one day, in the 4th grade, I scored 95 on a test and ranked first in my class. Mom, Dad. I got the highest score. Look. I thought they would praise me. With flushed cheeks, I presented my test paper, but my parents just sighed. So what if you got 95 on an elementary school test? Why can't you score 100? Lucy was solving college-level problems at your age. After being told that, I couldn't hold back and ended up crying in my room. Then, my sister came to me and said, Abby, I'm sorry it's always because of me. No, it's not your fault, Lucy. It's my fault for not being as excellent as you. Abby, you're kind and you're also a class representative, right? I couldn't do that. I know you have a lot of good qualities. My sister had this kindness in her. An oddball who always seemed like an alien buried in her studies. She never became arrogant or mean, even though our parents favored her. That's why I couldn't help but admire and love my sister, even though I wasn't envious. Time passed, and as my sister entered private middle school, my mom changed. She used to be just a normal part-time housewife. But suddenly she started wearing brand-name clothes. All the parents at the middle school are wealthy. I have to make sure I'm not looked down upon. Because of this, my parents tried to reduce the money they spent on me as much as possible. I don't remember getting anything for my birthday or Christmas after early elementary school. My basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter were met, but all my clothes were hand-me-downs from my sister. Even if they were too small or had holes, I had to wear them, which was embarrassing. My sister would let me choose clothes I wanted. But my standing in the family was still the worst. In fact, I was treated like a nuisance. After graduating from junior high, my sister went on to one of the top high schools in the country. There, she maintained her position as a top student, delighting our parents. I went to a local middle school, but by then, my parents had completely lost interest in me. In fact, they treated me even more dismissively than before. One day, my dad proudly announced, "Lucy, you ranked 3rd overall in the national mock exams. You're truly a genius." My mom's voice was excited. She was the top in math and English. To be among the top 5 in America. You really are my pride and joy. While listening to this conversation, I also said, "Congratulations, Lucy." My dad looked delightedly at my sister alone. Today, we've reserved a restaurant to celebrate. Let's go. My mom, dressed in her expensive brand clothes and applying lipstick, said, "Make sure you eat a lot today, Lucy." That's when I chimed in. "Are we eating out today? Then I'll change." At this, both my parents exclaimed in unison, "Huh," and then looked at each other and burst out laughing. "What's wrong, Mom and Dad? No way we're taking someone like you to a fancy restaurant." "That's right, don't get carried away. You're staying home." Then my sister spoke up. "Mom, Dad, I want to go with Abby." "Oh, Lucy, you're so kind. But today is about celebrating you, right?" "Exactly. We just booked for 3 people. Come on, Lucy, let's get going." So, my dad pulled my sister along. As my mom followed him, I called out in a panic, "Mom, what about my dinner? What should I do?" "Huh? Eat this if you're hungry." My mom pointed her chin towards a package of expired deli bread. Such. Lucy gets a fancy restaurant, and I get this? It's a million times more beneficial to use that money for Lucy's education expenses than to indulge you. Be grateful you're getting food at all. Later, my parents and sister drove off, leaving me behind, biting into the cold deli bread. Tears streamed down one after another, making me feel miserable. Hours later, when my sister returned, she brought me a boxed meal from the restaurant, filled with steak and salad. "Abby, I brought this back for you to eat." I pushed her hand away. "Just leave me alone today. Just seeing that makes me feel more miserable." "Abby, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." My sister wasn't to blame. But at that moment, I was deeply hurt. By the time I was in my 3rd year of middle school, and my sister was in her final year of high school, something unusual happened. I was called by my parents. "Abby, I have something important to discuss today. Actually, Lucy has been accepted into one of the top universities in the country. So, congratulations, Lucy." As I said that, my sister quietly responded, "Thank you." Then, my mom continued, "That's why we've decided to move to Boston." So I'm moving too, and I'll look for a high school there?" Suddenly, my dad began to laugh. "What are you talking about? There's no way we're taking you." "What?" "But I'm going to be a high school student next fall. We don't have the money to send you to high school. It's all going to Lucy. So what should I do?" "We've decided to put you in an institution." "Huh?" I was stunned. We were moving for my sister's education, and they were putting me in an institution. Are they serious? The discussion is over. Someone from the institution will come to pick you up tomorrow, so pack your bags. After being told that, I returned to my room in shock. My sister was saying something, but I didn't hear a word. The next day, a kind-looking staff member from the institution came to pick me up. Having lost all will to resist, I was about to get into the institution's car. Lastly, my mom told me, "Not having to put up with a failure like you is a huge weight off my shoulders. Goodbye, we won't see each other again." With that, the car door closed. My sister was shouting something until the end. I turned my eyes away from her. Since then, my life at the institution began. The staff were all nice people. And the other kids were kind to me too. I managed to go to high school. And I studied desperately. 2 years after entering the institution, I had a significant encounter. This is Mr. and Mrs. Hansen. They are considering adopting you. I was introduced by the head of the institution to a kind-looking middle-aged couple, unable to have children of their own. They had come to the institution to find a child to adopt. They had noticed me because I was working hard in my studies. The man, introducing himself as James Hansen, told me, "I've heard about your situation. Would you come and live with us?" His wife, Megan, continued, "Of course, you can go to any university you like. Think of us as your real parents. And rely on us for anything." It must have been tough for you. Touched by their kind tone, I was in tears. "Thank you, I would be honored to join your family." Thus, I was taken in by the Hansen family. Since they owned a company, they were wealthy and tried to provide me with everything. They served nutritious and delicious meals every day, which was like a dream come true for me. Gradually, I opened up to the Hansen couple, and they too doted on me as their own daughter. They even let me attend tutoring classes, and as a result, I was able to enroll in a prestigious private university, though not as prestigious as the one my sister attended. When the acceptance notice came, I said, "It's all thanks to you, Mom and Dad." "Thank you." The Hansen couple was moved to tears with joy. "You're calling us Mom and Dad?" Thank you, thank you. "Abby, you are our beloved daughter." "Yes. We will support whatever future you choose, Abby. You can do whatever you like." Upon hearing that, I told them something with a serious face. 10 years had passed since I was sent to the institution. One day, as I was finishing work and about to head home, I finally found you. "Abby, you're Abby, right?" Suddenly, my biological parents were standing in front of me. "We've missed you. You've grown up to be so splendid, truly our daughter." While they were smiling as they said this, I twisted my face. "What do you want now?" "Abby, I saw in a business magazine. You're going to be the heir to Hansen Corporation, aren't you?" My mom thrust the magazine at me. In it, there was a photo of me and my foster dad with the headline, "The bond between father and daughter at Major Hansen Corporation." In fact, my foster dad was the president of a major local company. When I went to university, I told my foster dad, "I want to work at your company and be of use." My foster parents were truly delighted by this. Later, I took the proper entrance exams and joined Hansen Corporation, where I progressed and improved my performance. My foster dad, recognizing my abilities, told me last year, "I'm thinking of making you the next president," and kept me close to teach me the business. My biological dad, grinning with his yellow teeth, sneered, "Being the heir to Hansen Corporation, you must be making a lot of money. What does that have to do with you? We're family, aren't we? We're just happy about our daughter's growth." "And Lucy? Isn't she supposed to be happily living with her family in Boston?" I said sarcastically, but my dad grimaced. "Ah, she's no good. She ran off overseas after graduating from university. Really, we thought she'd become a doctor or lawyer and support us. But she abandoned us. Such an ungrateful daughter, despite all we did for her." My parents were voicing their unhappiness. I didn't say a word, just listened. "But we have Abby now. Since you're our daughter, you'll help out your real parents, right? We couldn't find decent jobs in Boston. And we have debts, so we came back. Please help us out." "That's right, we're family, aren't we? When parents are in trouble, it's the daughter's duty to take care of them." My parents had the audacity to say this, and I was dumbfounded. Just as I was about to respond, the Hanson couple appeared. "Do you need something from our daughter?" My mom, flustered, raised her voice. "What do you mean by that?" "We're just having a family conversation. Don't interfere." To them, I bluntly declared, "I have been legally adopted by my parents here. These people are my real parents." "What? Adoption? Without our permission? As an adult, I can do it by my own choice. These people are my dad and mom. You guys are practically strangers to me now. Don't talk to me anymore. Please leave." Then my mom shouted, "Abby, you're not planning to ditch us, are you? If you walk away, we're done for." I finally snapped back, reaching my limit. "I haven't forgotten that you threw me away. Now it's my turn to ditch you. I'll give back what you said. Goodbye, we won't see each other again." Intimidated by my firm stance, my parents faltered. And I had one last thing to say to them. "If you show up in front of us again, I'll call the police. Other than that, just fall into hell together." Leaving my stunned parents behind, I left the scene with the Hanson couple. Later, I heard that my parents went around begging relatives for money, but were turned away at every door and ended up moving into a dilapidated apartment. Assuming they'd be supported by my sister, they had saved little and were in debt. They finally had to start working. Due to their age, they couldn't find decent jobs. So my dad returned to being a security guard, and my mom went back to part-time work at a supermarket. Hearing this, I felt no sympathy. My true feelings were of schadenfreude. Meanwhile, I was on vacation in the UK. "Abby, over here. Oh, I've wanted to see you for so long." My sister, crying, embraced me. It turns out, we had been in touch ever since she sent letters to the institution. She got a job at a big company in the UK and is officially married now. "Hey Lucy, I think we've really figured out what real happiness is, right?" I also cried as I hugged my sister back. We were just like when we were kids, holding each other close and crying our hearts out. I plan to continue working hard and repaying the Hansons for their kindness. And to brighten my own future, I made that promise to myself. First of all, why do I have to attend a funeral for someone who's not even related to our family? What does she mean by unrelated? We are not so free that we can attend strangers' funerals. Just have it without us. Saying this, my mother-in-law hung up the phone. When I returned from the funeral, I found a piece of paper on the table. A divorce paper. At that moment, I decided to sever ties with my husband and his family. I thought, I will use that money just for my mom and me. My name is Ashley, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband, Steve, and I met at a mixer 3 years ago. He had a kind demeanor, and I felt that life with him would be peaceful and happy. We exchanged contact details and started dating. As expected, he was always gentle, and I felt very healed by him. He took great care of me, and I seriously considered marrying him. Then, he felt the same way and proposed to me. Of course, I accepted immediately. That's how we got married. After that, we quickly went to greet each other's parents. First, we met my parents, who felt relieved seeing his kind demeanor. They both gave their blessing for our wedding. Next, we went to greet his family. His parents and a younger sister lived at his home. And his sister was also present during our marriage greeting. His family seemed very close, and he was even more smiley with me around. Not just kind, but family-oriented, truly a good person, I thought. Growing even fonder of him. I imagined that even if we had children, we would build a warm, happy home. However, there was one thing I disliked about marrying him: the wedding. Steve and I discussed our wedding plans extensively and were preparing various things. But at some point, his mom and sister started interfering. It started with him saying, "My mom suggests this for the wedding," which I initially appreciated. However, gradually his mom began to intrude more, even joining the wedding discussions. I wanted to decide with Steve alone, but I couldn't just tell his mom to leave, so I reluctantly allowed her to participate. Then his sister also started joining the discussions, saying this and that about the wedding. And even when I expressed my wishes, his mom and sister would say it's not good or their way is better. It was my wedding, but Steve agreed with his mom and sister, so I compromised. The worst was the wedding dress. I had a dress I desperately wanted to wear. I loved it when I tried it on before, it was adorable. But his mom and sister didn't hold back, calling it tacky. They said wearing it was unthinkable, that it made my body look bad and old. Then they picked a dress for me, insisting it was better, and forced me to wear it. I didn't feel it suited me at all. I told Steve I didn't like this dress, but he said, "Mom and sis picked it out, so let's go with it," failing to support me. I was taken aback. It was our wedding, yet why couldn't he respect my opinion? Despite that, he was very kind, and since we were already living together, he took the initiative in housework and cooking. And because I loved him, I didn't consider canceling the wedding. In the end, I wore the dress picked by his mom and sister as the main outfit, and changed into my favored dress for the reception. His mom and sister were pleased with their choice. But later I heard from everyone that the dress I chose was much more beautiful. Even my close friends wondered why the usually stylish Ashley chose such a dress. That's how my wedding became both a sweet and bitter memory. And it was an incident that made me distrust his family members. Since then, we've been very careful dealing with his family, which has kept our relations not too bad over 3 years of marriage. But recently, a problem occurred when my dad became seriously ill, requiring care. Since then, I've been visiting my parents' house to care for my dad with my mom. Steve, being fundamentally kind and able to do housework himself, didn't complain about my caring for my dad. He even drove me there when he could. However, during Christmas, I angered his family. Knowing my dad couldn't move well and to reduce my mom's burden, I returned to my parents' house early to help with the Christmas preparations, and spent it with just the 3 of us. The doctor had said my dad's condition wasn't good, and I didn't know how long I could spend time with him. So I wanted to spend Christmas with my parents and my own family. But this seemed to anger his family. Suddenly, during Christmas, Steve called. "Hello? What's up, Steve? Ashley, can you come here right now? What's wrong?" "Well, Mom and everyone are upset, saying why aren't you coming?" "What?" "But I told you clearly. I want to spend this year with my parents." "Didn't you tell them properly?" "Yes, I definitely did. But Mom and everyone won't accept it. A wife usually shows her face at her husband's home during Christmas. All my relatives are waiting too, can't you come?" I was speechless. Steve understood my dad's situation better than anyone in his family. Yet, why was he persuaded by his parents? Sorry, but I've decided to spend this year with my own parents. I can't go to your parents' place. When I spoke firmly, Steve sounded very feeble. Don't say things like that. Pleading with me to come, unable to oppose his family. But his parents are still healthy. And even his sister is still at home, and relatives are gathered. So surely it's no problem if I don't attend. Still, I wanted to spend Christmas at my home this year. But this event worsened my relationship with his family suddenly. Later, I visited his family's home with a gift for Christmas greetings and an apology. But they were noticeably cold to me. Oh, you're coming now? What are you here for? Ah, I came for Christmas greetings. Here is a gift of sweets, I said, but my mother-in-law snatched it away, saying coldly, "We don't need any greetings." I realized she was quite angry and apologized. "I'm sorry I couldn't join the family gathering over Christmas. I think Steve has told you, but my dad has a severe illness. And we don't know how much longer he can be with us," I explained. "I wanted to spend Christmas with him. I hope you can understand." As I said this, the family members coldly watched me with crossed arms. "I guess you believe we're not really important to you, huh?" My mother-in-law accused me. "No. That's not true." "Oh really? Then show us some sincerity that you care about us," she challenged. Sincerity? Yes, that's right. First, buy us the sweets we like. Not just any random sweets like these, she said, and to my shock, she threw the gift of sweets I brought into the trash can. I was stunned. Steve looked uncomfortable. Then his sister spoke up. "Well, I want a pumpkin pie from XX. That bakery was incredibly expensive." Next, my father-in-law said, "Then I'll have a cheesecake from XX. That shop was also quite pricey." Finally, my mother-in-law declared, "I think I'll have chocolates from XX." The price of those chocolates was no less than the pumpkin pie. Moreover, the 3 stores they mentioned were all located quite far from each other. Fulfilling their wishes all at once would be quite a challenge. "Can we agree on just one place?" I asked. The family members gave me the same cold look as before. And then it was Steve who responded. "Of course not, buy everyone what they want." What? I was speechless. I had thought that Steve would support me against such unreasonable demands. Moreover, on the way here, he had promised to try and mediate between his family and me. But as soon as we arrived, he sided with his family. Disappointed in Steve, I rushed to the car and hurried to buy what his family had demanded. However, upon returning, I was scolded for being late and called useless. I had to wait at popular shops, and none of the stores were close to each other, so it naturally took time. Yet, why must I be criticized like this? From then on, Steve's family regularly summoned us to their house, treating me like a servant. "You said you'd take care of us, so it's only fair that you do this much, don't you think?" They would say while making me do all sorts of chores like housework, cooking, and running errands. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and said, "I'm fed up with being treated unfairly," and refused to go to their house anymore. No matter how much I complied, their treatment of me never improved but only worsened. Moreover, balancing visits to his family with caring for my dad was too much. So I decided to only visit my parents' house. Steve blamed me, saying, "Why won't you listen to my mom?" I had reached my limit. I refused to be used like a maid or slave anymore, I told him clearly. His family might have been yelling, but I ignored them and focused on caring for my dad. However, during this time, my dad's condition worsened, and he was taken to the hospital, where he passed away. My mom and I were engulfed in grief, but there were many preparations to be made for the funeral, so we decided to mourn after everything was arranged. While busily preparing, I called Steve to inform him and asked him to have his family attend my dad's funeral. Steve said, "Okay," but minutes later, I received a call from him. And it was actually my mother-in-law on the line. "Hello, is this Ashley?" "Mother, what's the matter? Who do you think you are?" "Excuse me?" Demanding us to come to a funeral all of a sudden, how presumptuous. First of all, why do I have to attend a funeral for someone who's not even related to our family? What did she mean by that? We are not so free that we can attend strangers' funerals. Stranger. Steve and I are married, aren't we family? Humph. A useless wife like you is just a stranger. So your dad is just a stranger to us too. We don't care about your dad's funeral. Just have it without us. With that, my mother-in-law hung up the phone. I was speechless. I hurriedly messaged Steve, but he replied, "Mom said we don't have to go, so I won't." I was shocked as I read his message over and over. Does Steve not have his own will? I was appalled by his compliance with his family's demands. I decided to focus on my dad's funeral, and together with my mom, we proceeded. When relatives asked why Steve and his family weren't there, I answered honestly. Everyone was outraged, suggesting I should cut ties with such people. At this point, I was also considering divorce. I had to have a serious talk with Steve once I got home. After returning from the funeral, I noticed a piece of paper on the table. I was shocked when I saw it. A divorce paper. Steve filled out his part already, and I was convinced his parents were fine with it. Steve was not home, and I couldn't even discuss it with him. It must have been his decision. At that moment, I decided to sever ties with my husband and his family. If they were inclined that way, I was not going to hold back either. I immediately submitted the divorce paper to the office, packed my belongings, and returned to my parents' house. Since my mom had heard the phone call during the funeral, when I told her about the divorce paper, she warmly welcomed me, saying, "This saves us a lot of trouble." I felt relieved to be able to separate from my husband at this point. If I had continued the marriage awkwardly, surely my dad's inheritance would have been targeted by his family. I decided to use that money just for my mom and me. A few days later, while I was peacefully spending time with my mom, my ex-husband suddenly called me. "Hey Ashley, how long are you planning not to come back?" "What? What are you talking about? I've already left that house." "What?" My ex-husband sounded very foolish. "What are you saying?" "Left. Because you left that divorce paper, that was your will, right?" I had reached my limit too, so I submitted it. "What? Really? That was supposed to be used as a threat by Mom and the others. I never intended to divorce you." I was utterly exasperated. You really can't make decisions on your own, can you? Breaking up was definitely the right decision. As I said this, it seemed my ex-husband was at his parents' house and had put the call on speaker, because the voice on the phone changed to my former mother-in-law. "What the hell are you doing? What do you mean? You guys are the ones who made me leave the divorce papers, right? I submitted them taking your intentions into account. What a terrible daughter-in-law you are." I'm not your daughter-in-law anymore. Shut up. It's absurd to submit the divorce papers before sorting out things like property division. Right. Didn't your dad pass away and leave you an inheritance? Give us half of that money. Steve was still your husband when your dad died. So he deserves half of the inheritance. Well, indeed, the division should be half each. So, how much did you inherit? I inherited $600,000. $600,000. Upon hearing about the large sum, my ex-in-laws rejoiced. So, Steve can get $300,000. If he gets that much, you are of no use to us anymore. Once you transfer the money, live however you want. How selfish can these people be? And how foolish. What are you talking about? My dad's inheritance doesn't fall under property division. What? It's all mine. Besides, you all called my dad and me strangers, didn't you? I have no money to give to strangers. Too bad for you. Please give it up. The voices on the other end of the phone quieted down suddenly. What? So, we won't get a penny. Yes, please give it up. Isn't it fine? You got rid of a terrible daughter-in-law like me. When I said that, my ex-in-laws quickly changed their tune and began to plead with me. Ashley, everything up to now was just a lie. It was like a long, drawn-out prank. That's right. We totally think of you as family. Such blatant lies make me sick. It's a waste of time to deal with these people. I'm going to hang up now. If you even come near my house, I will call the police immediately. After I said that, my ex-in-laws fell silent. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. To keep things safe, my mom and I sold our house and moved to a new place. It turned out to be a really good idea. Apparently, my ex-in-laws, harboring a grudge, attempted to break into my old home with weapons to steal money from me. Luckily, strangers were living there by then and promptly reported them, leading to their arrest. As a result, my ex-husband, ex-father-in-law, and ex-sister-in-law lost their jobs and are now living a miserable life as the whole family is unemployed. Meanwhile, my mom and I signed a lease for a modest apartment, and I am using my dad's inheritance for our future. I continue to work hard and live happily with my mom, supporting each other as a family. I'm sorry to trouble you, but thank you in advance, even if it's just for a little while. My sister-in-law has returned to her parents' home after her divorce. According to her, the divorce was due to differences in values and severe emotional abuse from her husband. Since my husband and I were already living with my in-laws, my sister-in-law apologized to us, looking quite remorseful. I had heard that she planned to find a new job and move out soon, so I told her, "This is your family home, so don't worry and take your time to rest." Little did I know that her return would start to trouble me. My name is Anna. I'm a 31-year-old housewife who works part-time. My husband is often away on business trips in other prefectures. Originally, we lived in a rental apartment, but at my mother-in-law's strong request, we started living with my in-laws. My son is often away on business trips, and I worry about Anna. Living together can save on rent and allow us to save money. We're getting old, so it would be reassuring to have you with us. I was a bit surprised when my husband told me about her suggestion, but I agreed. At the time, we had a good relationship with his parents. And more than anything, it made my life easier. After living together for 2 years, I now honestly regret it. Initially, I got along well with my in-laws, but everything changed last year, when my sister-in-law Rebecca returned home after her divorce. "Anna, I'd like to have pork cutlet for dinner today," Rebecca told me that as I walked in from my part-time job and let go of the grocery bags. "No, you can't just spring that on me. I was planning to cook salmon today." My mother-in-law, who had been watching from the shadows, interjected. "You know pork cutlet is Rebecca's favorite, don't you? As a daughter-in-law, you should consider the family's favorites when planning meals." "I'm sorry, I'll be more careful next time," I replied nonchalantly and ignored my mother-in-law's sarcasm. I headed to the kitchen to put away the groceries. The meek Rebecca, who had returned home after her divorce, was nowhere to be found. I think now that her apology to me and my husband was just an act, and she had planned to stay at her parents' home all along. My mother-in-law, initially very kind, is now completely under Rebecca's influence. Now, they both harass me daily, treating me like a maid. I do all the household chores, and with my part-time job, I'm always exhausted. Rebecca does no housework and contributes nothing to the living expenses. She either lounges around like a lazy bear or goes out dressed up gaudily. I think we should end this living arrangement, but my husband is often away, and it's hard to have a discussion about it. There's another reason too. Anna, welcome back. Even though it's Sunday, you've worked hard at your part-time job. I'll put away the groceries in the fridge, so take a break. Dinner is too much for one person, so I'll help you. Dad, thank you always. My concern is my father-in-law. With my husband gone, his kindness is what keeps me from falling apart. He treated Rebecca like a princess growing up, just like my mother-in-law did. But he's not afraid to call them out when she pushes me too far. She's my dear daughter, but I must correct her when she's wrong, he believes. However, every time, my mother-in-law scolds him, saying, "How can you, as a father, take your daughter-in-law's side over your own daughter? You're really a failure as a husband." I fear that once my husband and I leave this house, my father-in-law will be the one exploited and ridiculed instead of me. I reached the bedroom we use as a couple and sighed heavily. I took my wallet out of my bag and counted the bills inside, recording them in a notebook. There's a reason for this. A year ago, not long after Rebecca returned, I started noticing that the money in my wallet was decreasing. Money is missing again. It started with a few dollars feeling off and gradually increased. Being meticulous about money, I trusted my instincts and began keeping records. When hundreds were missing, I couldn't help but laugh at how obvious it had become that someone was stealing from my wallet. Despite taking measures like carrying my wallet around, Rebecca scolded me, saying, "It's in the way to carry a wallet around while doing household chores." I don't want to suspect a family member, but Rebecca is suspicious. It might seem bad to assume, but she hasn't worked since her divorce yet goes out often. How she manages money is a mystery. I've discussed this with my husband before, but there was no evidence. Next time, I'll definitely catch her in the act. It seems the thief is watching my movements closely, hardly showing any openings. I closed the notebook I had been recording in, put on my apron, and left the room. One day, as I was doing the housework that my mother-in-law had pushed onto me, I decided to take a break and headed to my room. Suddenly, I saw Rebecca opening the door and entering the room my husband and I share. Instantly, thoughts of the money in my wallet flashed through my mind. This was my chance to catch her in the act. Determined, I stepped in and found her frozen, clutching my wallet, even sticking her fingers inside it. This was definitive proof. "What are you doing?" In my calm voice, Rebecca hastily closed her wallet. "What do you mean?" "I just found your wallet in the hallway and thought I'd put it in your bag for you." "What were you doing, sticking your fingers inside it?" "If your story were true, you wouldn't need to do that, right?" Realizing she was suspected, Rebecca forced a smile. "Are you accusing me?" "I haven't stolen any money. You always carry around just $500. Aren't you being a bit paranoid?" Rebecca raised her voice and forcefully shoved the wallet back into my bag. There have been times before when the money in my wallet was missing. Please tell me the truth. Was it Rebecca who was taking it? Convinced that Rebecca was the thief, I confronted her directly. Indeed, I always kept about $500 in my wallet for emergencies. But I was the only one who knew that habit. What's going on here? Hearing Rebecca's loud voice, my mother-in-law appeared and looked at me. Mom, listen. She's accusing me of stealing money from Anna's wallet. And she says I've done it several times before. At Rebecca's plea, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply. Anna, how could you say such things to Rebecca? Ever since Rebecca came back, I've found that money keeps going missing from my wallet. And now, I saw Rebecca entering this room without permission and touching my wallet. My desperate plea was ineffective against my mother-in-law, who unconditionally supported her daughter. A thought flashed in my mind that I should have recorded the evidence on my phone. But I was too focused on catching her in the act. How can you be such a horrible daughter-in-law? To treat Rebecca like a thief. I can't believe it. After all, you're just an outsider. Anna, you're just being paranoid. Perhaps you wanted to play the victim to attract attention? The word outsider hit me hard. I had tried my best as a wife and family member, even though it had only been 2 years. Enough was enough. Without saying a word, I left the room, slipped on my sandals, and walked outside. Where do you think you're going without making dinner? Rebecca's voice followed me. But I didn't care. My pace gradually slowed as it was getting dark and the wind felt cold. I had stepped outside in my indoor clothes and old apron. With bare feet and sandals, without my smartphone or wallet. Feeling lost, I sat on a park bench when, Anna, what are you doing here? I looked up to see my father-in-law in his suit. I recognized that apron from a distance. Embarrassed, I realized this apron was a gift from my mother-in-law when we agreed to live together. Taking the canned soda he offered, I thanked him. And overwhelmed, I began to cry. I told him everything, how the money had occasionally gone missing since Rebecca returned, and how today I finally caught her, but my mother-in-law wouldn't believe me. And both of them verbally attacked me. My father-in-law listened silently, then apologized deeply. I'm truly sorry. The behavior of my wife and Rebecca is too much. And I'm responsible for not stopping their misbehavior. Prefacing his next words with a thought he had been considering, he continued. Perhaps it's time to end the cohabitation. It's clear that neither I nor your husband would want you to endure this hardship. Surprised by his proposal, I was grateful but also worried about how he would fare without me. Anyway, let's go back. Buying a slightly expensive takeout might make them forget to complain. As I hesitated for words, my father-in-law smiled as if he could see right into my heart. As we returned home, just as I had imagined, my mother-in-law and Rebecca approached complainingly. Handing over the dinner I bought, their mood quickly improved. And they paid me no further attention. I used my father-in-law's distraction to go to my room and call my husband to discuss ending the cohabitation and to tell him about today's events. One evening a week later, as my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I were having dinner, we heard the front door. It seemed Rebecca had returned from her outing today, but with a thunderous noise. Stomping down the hallway with a demonic expression, Rebecca appeared. "Rebecca, please come home more quietly." Ignoring what my father-in-law said, Rebecca shot me a nasty look, pulled out a handful of bills from her wallet, and slammed them down hard on the table. Instead of the familiar $100 bills, these were just toy money showing a strange character, where you'd expect to see Benjamin Franklin. I was on a date with someone I met through a marriage agency today, and I embarrassed myself. "Rebecca, were you engaged in a matchmaking service?" I feigned surprise, which caused her to blush. "That's not the point." "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted at close range, causing me to wince. "I can hear you without shouting." "Rebecca says she hasn't been taking money from my wallet. And since my mother-in-law doesn't believe me, I decided to put toy bills in my wallet as a test." It turns out Rebecca was the culprit after all. The fact that she used the toy bills without realizing only shows how habitual her stealing had become, probably not even bothering to check in the dim light of the room. I don't know who she was dating, but the person must have been quite shocked. Realizing she had inadvertently confessed due to my comment, Rebecca froze. At the other end of her gaze, my mother-in-law expressed shock, unbelievable. "Rebecca, wasn't the pocket money I gave you enough? I've been giving you $300 a month from my savings." I can't believe what Anna said was true. My father-in-law, who had believed me from the start, looked at Rebecca with a look of astonishment. "You were giving Rebecca that much money without telling me?" My father-in-law sighed deeply as it was revealed that my mother-in-law had been giving Rebecca a substantial allowance each month. Rebecca began to make excuses. "Well, if I remarry, I can be a housewife and live comfortably again. Finding a job and living alone is just too much trouble." This reasoning didn't hold up at all, and even though I had a lot to complain about the notion that my money was funneled into Rebecca's matchmaking was just laughably absurd. Rebecca looked to our mother for support, but she averted her eyes. Realizing she had no allies left, Rebecca exclaimed, "It's just $100. You've embarrassed me twice, unforgivable," and raised her hand. I instinctively closed my eyes, but felt no impact. When I opened them, my husband was holding Rebecca's arm, having arrived like a hero, to the surprise of the entire family. "Why are you here? You weren't supposed to be back yet." "My work finished earlier than expected." My husband responded gently to my question, then turned to face my mother-in-law and Rebecca. "I've heard everything from Anna and Dad. On the day I fled the in-laws' house, I had spoken to my husband over the phone, detailing the mistreatment by my mother-in-law and Rebecca, and my inability to tolerate it any longer. My husband was really apologetic, and thought we should swap the real money for some toy bills to catch Rebecca in front of my in-laws and back up my claims. Now that it's clear Anna was right, shouldn't Mother and Rebecca apologize? Faced with my father-in-law's words and my husband's stern look, my mother-in-law and Rebecca were at a loss for words. Didn't Rebecca promise to find a new job and move out immediately? At my husband's reminder, my mother-in-law retorted, "This is Rebecca's home too. She can stay as long as she wants." Of course, that would have been fine if Anna wasn't being made to suffer. My husband said, standing by my side and placing his hand on my shoulder, which gave me strength. I've gone over this with my father-in-law and my husband. But I just can't forgive you, Rebecca and mother-in-law. So, we're going to stop living together. My mother-in-law looked shocked, but I reminded her. You were the one who said I was an outsider. By the way, I spoke on the phone with Rebecca's ex-husband recently. Apparently, her misuse of money and her emotional abuse were the real reasons for their divorce, not what she had been telling everyone. He was furious that he hadn't demanded compensation out of compassion. This was news to all of us, and we all exclaimed in surprise. Why are you contacting him without permission? You're the one at fault for lying to us. Her ex-husband said he's definitely going to demand compensation from her. Rebecca's face, previously flushed with anger, now turned pale with fear as she trembled. It seems my husband had always had doubts about the reasons for her divorce. Inspired by my father-in-law's words, I decided to make a bold move and called the ex-husband myself. At this point, Rebecca was on the verge of tears. By the way, Rebecca, I've been keeping accurate records of the money you took from my wallet. Please make sure to pay it back. My words were the final blow, causing Rebecca to slump to the ground, utterly defeated. Half a year later, after my husband and I moved out, I learned from my father-in-law that my parents-in-law had kicked out Rebecca. According to him, my mother-in-law had finally come to her senses and was now like a different person, even doing household chores. We hadn't cut ties completely, but we decided to keep our distance unless necessary. The money Rebecca had stolen from my wallet was returned, although in installments, from the money she earned working. However, her ex-husband, outraged by her claims, sued her for compensation for the emotional abuse during their marriage. It's only right that she ended up like this because of her lies. Recently, I received an apology letter from my mother-in-law. I had a moment where I recalled my caring mother-in-law from when I just moved in. But there was no way to take back what happened after that. Now, with my husband's work more relaxed, we are enjoying a peaceful life together. I'm committed to never taking anyone's love for granted, and to ensuring I never hurt those important to me. It's time for the bride and groom to enter. Hey, why are you here? Shouldn't guests be seated by now? Did you arrange for there to be no seat for me? There's no seat for outsiders, so leave. As usual, such a selfish, spoiled, childish woman. Anger is rising, but it's a celebration. So I need to stay calm. It's okay, by the time the reception is over, she will regret it. I turned my back on my sister-in-law without saying a word. I left the wedding venue without turning back, hearing her loud laughter. My name is Mary, and I'm 37. I'm a housewife living with my husband. I work from home, which allows me to work whenever I like, making it easy to balance with household chores. My husband is kind, serious, and calm. I've never seen him angry. My husband has a younger sister named Julia. She was a college student until last year. She's cute, delicate, and sensitive to trends, just like today's young women. Having lost their parents early, my husband has been like a parent to her since she was young. The two siblings have supported each other throughout their lives. Naturally, as his wife, the sister-in-law sees me as a rival, feeling as if her only family has been taken away. I can understand her feelings. Thinking back, ever since we first met 2 years ago, she has glared at me, ignored me, and made snide remarks, clear acts of malice. From my perspective, as a woman in her 40s, her obvious jealousy seems almost cute. Brother is too good for you, or dress better, your embarrassing brother, she would say, and I'd just respond casually, okay, sorry about that, and brush it off. At least until recently. Hello, is brother here? She would suddenly come to visit like this. This month alone, she's come over 10 times. I was welcoming at first since we were newly married. But it's become too frequent and annoying. She's selfish, not caring about our circumstances. I understand she wants to see her brother. But she's an adult and should call before coming. It's frustrating. When I open the door, oh, it's you, Mary. Where's brother? He just went to the convenience store. Then I'll wait. She enters without permission, takes a drink from the fridge, and sits on the sofa. It's always like this, but today, with my husband not home, it feels a bit more irritating. From her perspective, it might be brother's house. But it's also my house. I hardened my heart and told her, Julia, I've always thought this, but you really should stop your thoughtless behavior. Huh? What are you suddenly talking about? It's not just about you, your actions could embarrass others too. Be careful. I tried to say it in as kind a tone as possible, but it seems to have upset her. Taking advantage of brother not being here, are you bullying me? That's not what I mean, Julia. I think it will cause you trouble later. I won't forgive you. I'm going to tell brother. I don't mind. What a hassle. It's not like a children's quarrel to tattle. After all, I won't listen to a shut-in freeloader like you. I was stunned. Usually, I don't care much about what she says. But calling me a freeloader is something I cannot ignore. I'm working from home, not a shut-in or a freeloader. Yeah, let's just say that. If you're not a freeloader, then maybe just a burden? In front of her brother, she never shows this disrespectful attitude, which makes me angry. Just then, my husband returned. I'm home. Hearing his voice, the sister-in-law suddenly changed her demeanor. Brother, welcome back. Julia, you were here again? Yes. I was nearby and came to see brother. She snuggles up to him, not really wanting to be affectionate with her real brother, but rather to compete with me. Listen. Mary was terrible to me just now. She begins to talk excitedly, while I decide to remain silent. She said I have no common sense and called me shameless, so horrible. Mary said that? Yes. I was so scared I almost cried, sniffle. My husband looked at me with a troubled face, clearly realizing the story was exaggerated. He wants to be a kind brother for her, and hopes his wife and sister get along well, but being caught in the middle is tough. So, brother, scold Mary, will you? The puzzled look on my husband's face. I sighed. This is why I dread visits from my sister-in-law. It's exhausting to deal with her. My husband said. Mary wouldn't say that without a reason. Did you do something, Julia? Her eyes widened in shock, not expecting to be accused. What? I'm the bad one? That's not what I meant. I can't believe it, brother. You've changed since getting married. It's all her fault. Stop it, the weird one is you. Brother? It's okay, you can learn common sense. It's good to take adults around you as examples. As my husband said this and nodded at me, I did the same. She didn't like that, got angry, and stormed out with loud footsteps. I refuse. I don't care anymore. My husband shrugged his shoulders and said, "Sorry for my selfish sister. It's hard to say, that's okay, or no problem," and I struggled to respond. "She'll probably come back as if nothing happened, and it'll be fine. I wish she would find someone nice, so she wouldn't cling to me so much." My husband muttered this with a sigh. I agreed and nodded deeply. A month has passed since then. Really, there have been no visits from my sister-in-law. And we've been living peacefully. I thought she would quickly get over it. And come over as usual, but maybe she's still angry? I was also immature. I'm a bit concerned. But there was no need to worry. She suddenly visited as usual, wearing flashy clothes and new accessories that I've never seen before. And she was in a very good mood. I'm getting married. The wedding date is set. We were both surprised by the sudden good news. Isn't that too sudden? Well, I'm pregnant. What? Who's the partner? He's a company president, very wealthy. He fell in love with me at first sight and wants to marry me quickly. He buys me anything and listens to everything I say. Aren't you jealous? My boastful sister-in-law. Indeed, that is enviable. That's great, really great. My husband is genuinely happy. He seems to be teary-eyed. It's natural since he was a parent figure to her. I'm happy, of course. Congratulations, Julia. However, with a malicious smile, she said, "There are too many guests at the wedding, and they won't fit in the venue. You know, because he's a president." Wow, that's amazing. I feel bad for you, Mary, but there's only a seat for brother. Sorry. My mouth fell open. It's unimaginable, beyond common sense or manners. It's harassment. She smirked at me and said, "Brother, here, the invitation. The ceremony is in a month." Without accepting it, my husband shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I have a business trip that day." "What?" "I can't go, so please mark me as absent." He said it clearly, without hesitation. Don't joke. It's my only sister's wedding. Get someone else to replace your business trip. Julia. My husband calmly called his sister's name and advised her. If there are too many of her partner's guests to invite Mary, then I don't need to force myself to go. Let's have dinner together some other time. Really, congratulations on your marriage. Julia trembled with rage, unable to hide her anger. Are you serious? Of course. No, just come alone, brother. That's not possible. At that moment, she tore up the invitation. I thought I'd let just you come, but now. The worst. Once again, my sister-in-law stomped away with deliberately loud footsteps. She's just too childish. It's as if she's saying, "If you don't like it, I'll exclude you from the group." Hey, if it weren't for the business trip, would you have attended? When I asked my husband, he thought for a moment and then shook his head. Things can't always go as you want. That's true. A month later, I was alone at the wedding venue. Why? Because I was invited to a certain wedding. The banquet hall, lavishly decorated, was filled with tables right up to the walls. I pushed through the overflowing crowd of guests looking for my seat, but couldn't find it. Excuse me, I can't find my seat. When I asked the venue staff, they helped me, but with a puzzled look. They said, "This seat is already taken." I thanked them and stepped outside the hall. I work from home normally. So I'm not good with crowds. I wanted to sit down quickly. The bride and groom were about to enter. What should I do? Then, a familiar woman in a pure white dress walked towards me. My sister-in-law. How dare you show up? She said with a demonic expression, and I replied. Because I was invited. Yes, this is my sister-in-law's wedding. But, the person who invited me was the groom. He has been a friend for a long time, and we still keep in touch. When I saw the seating chart and your name under husband's friends, I thought it couldn't be you. Suddenly, I became curious about the tight design of her dress. Maybe it was nosy, but I asked, by the way, are you feeling okay? Don't overdo it. What do you mean? You're pregnant, right? She smiled a bit and said, it's okay, that was a lie to get married. What? He's a president, pays well, and is somewhat handsome. I couldn't let him get away, it's inevitable. I was speechless, shocked. It's all settled now. Unbelievable. Lies and jokes can't cover it. Fraud. How can she tell such a consequential lie so easily? Is there something loose in her head? If only Mary wasn't even a friend, it would have been perfect. Oh, the worst. It's not my fault. The groom has been my friend since before I met my sister-in-law. From our student days. He was always working too hard, bearing the pressure as the second generation of his company. I remember often giving him advice. His company only recently got on track. Yet, this woman pays well, somewhat handsome, sounding so haughty. Honestly, it was surprising that he chose my sister-in-law, but if he's happy, that's fine. And I wanted to celebrate in my own way. That's why I attended the wedding. Though I wasn't supposed to be invited. Julia, could you check where my seat is? She must have heard, but she ignored me. Ah. It's time for the entrance. Hey, why are you here? Guests should quickly take their seats. Her snickering attitude, she must know something. My seat is taken, someone else is sitting there. Could it be? Ah. Someone is sitting there? Then who are you? You're not a friend of my husband's. There's no seat for outsiders, so leave. As usual, she acts selfishly, spoiled, and mean-spirited in a childish way. I wanted to see the groom in all his glory and celebrate with him. But it seems that won't happen. I should head back. I'll apologize to the groom who invited me later. There's something bothering me. But if there's no seat for me, there's nothing I can do. I feel anger bubbling up as I watch my sister-in-law laughing carelessly in front of me. But it's a celebration, so I need to stay calm. It's okay, by the time the reception is over. She will regret it. I turned my back on my sister-in-law without saying a word. I left the wedding venue without looking back, listening to her loud laughter. When I got home, I received a call from the groom who had invited me. Right away, he apologized. I'm really sorry. I didn't realize you weren't there. I apologized too, saying, sorry for leaving. But he didn't hear me because my sister-in-law snatched the phone away. Hey. What are you going to do about this? What? What are you talking about? It's your fault. She ranted without explanation. What is she talking about? I would like to say. But I actually have a pretty good idea. Really, I'm so immature. The person sitting in my seat at the reception was a stand-in attendee arranged by my sister-in-law. She had deliberately prepared a woman with a similar build. Told her, just sit quietly, that's all, and had her sit there. During the reception, various people related to the groom kept coming to greet that seat. Why does everyone come to my seat instead of the day's main character? The stand-in woman wouldn't know. Of course. But since she was told to stay quiet, she just kept silently receiving business cards handed to her. Even if someone asked, "I'm a fan, could you say just one word, please?" She could only stay silent. The woman confirmed just once. "Is it really okay just to sit here?" She became anxious because she was repeatedly told, "We appreciate your help. And please help us again," but she couldn't lift her head. Wouldn't it be bad if it was found out she was a stand-in? However, the bride instructed her to continue. Of course, it's too late to back out now. Eventually, the reception hall darkened, and a short movie started playing. The content was introduced by the groom, a company president. This video was made by a friend as a celebration gift. I believe everyone gathered here has received help from this person. A creator who plans community events and corporate collaborations, contributing to local growth. A single person who draws, produces videos, and does narration, Mary. She even has many fans for her sweet voice. The bride sweated bullets. The shut-in or loser she thought was a creator? Sweet voice? What does that mean? When my company was struggling, Mary created our website. And now we get hundreds of inquiries from it. Many of you are from similar companies, right? Applause started in the venue. Terrified, the stand-in woman tried to escape while it was dark. Thank you for watching this wonderful movie. Mary, thank you for supporting our community. The spotlight hit the woman, revealing she was not the real person. Who is that? The venue erupted in chaos. The stand-in woman screamed, "I can't do this anymore. You said you'd just feed me delicious food." Saying that, she shoved the business cards at the bride. "I don't know anything about this," and ran away. The groom confronted his bride. "Where is my friend Mary?" I don't know." "Who is that woman?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" "But you were talking about it." "It's not my fault." "What are you going to do about this?" "I thought even my sister-in-law would regret it by now. But if Mary had just told me properly, I wouldn't have been this mean." Liar. That was her attitude. "I haven't lied about anything." Can't she even apologize now? Does she truly think she's not at fault? I said, "Please put the groom on the phone." "Then, will you persuade him?" "About what?" "He's thinking of calling off the marriage. All that's left is to submit the marriage registration." Really? The guests left early because of the awful atmosphere. Why should I have to defend her? I stayed silent and the phone was handed over to the groom. "Mary, I'm sorry, it was a movie you made specially for us." "It was really good, thank you." No, I'm really sorry about my sister-in-law." No, I'd like to say it's my wife's fault, but," he said with a sigh, "I fell in love with her at first sight because she was young, cute, and innocent. Seeing the true nature of my sister-in-law, which isn't just innocence but something dangerously immature, it's natural for him to have second thoughts." Even if she had apologized honestly, her defiant attitude is unacceptable. I think it's the worst thing to say as a man, or even as a person. But I find myself wishing there wasn't a baby in her belly. Huh? That lie was still ongoing? I truly sympathize with him, swayed by her fraudulent behavior. I don't think it's my place to say anything about their relationship, but he's an important friend. I want him to be happy. I decided to let something slip. She's not pregnant. What do you mean? There was never a baby from the start. Maybe you should verify that before deciding anything? I said that and hung up the phone. If he's only getting married out of a sense of duty, I wouldn't recommend continuing with her. They should really talk honestly. Honestly, I want to tell him to run away from such a woman right now. I'm really not being very adult about this. Still, it's a shame I couldn't watch the movie I made for a friend at the reception. Most of my work is published online, and I rarely get to see people's reactions in person. I reached out individually to friends and acquaintances who were invited to the wedding to apologize. Everyone gave me kind words and shared their thoughts on the movie. I was really pleased. There was even a new job order. Despite the mess, thanks to the groom, it turned into good publicity. Honestly, I hate being spotlighted in such a crowded place, as I usually don't show my face. And who started saying my narration was in a sweet voice? I admit I put on a bit of an act to be more audible. They mean it as a compliment, but it's embarrassing, and I wish they'd stop. When my husband returned from his business trip, he was furious at his sister for causing a scandal based on a lie. That almost led to a broken engagement. At the same time, he was worried. Given his position, that's understandable. He's depressed, wondering if there's something wrong with how he raised her, having been like a parent to her since they lost their parents, and listened to her kindly. But it's all brother's fault. You married such a woman. If you think it's bad, you should get a divorce too. Typical of her. Pure, unadulterated selfishness. She's an adult and a member of society. Even if she is his sister. Even if he's her brother, he's not responsible for absorbing that. My husband finally lost his temper. He cut off all means of contact and even posted a "Sister not welcome" sign at the front door. No calls are forwarded at his company. Worse than a stranger. Rejection from someone who has always been gentle is terrifying. When a usually calm person gets angry, it's truly frightening. His methods are merciless. At last, my sister-in-law quieted down. She probably never thought she'd be completely abandoned like this. I'm the only one she can still contact. Maybe one day she'll reflect and call to apologize? As long as she keeps blaming everyone else, who knows when that will be. Now, I'm swamped with work. Thankfully, I'm constantly getting new job requests through referrals and word of mouth. A blessing in disguise, really. That's all for now.